Hi everyone. Good to see you on my channel today. Today I will tell you a wonderful story. It is full of love and kindness. I hope you enjoy it and I wish you an enjoyable viewing experience. Thank you.
Deborah Smith encountered the usual bustle of the airport. People hurried past, pushing each other with suitcases and carts. Flight announcements sounded incessantly, the crowd in the queues buzzed, getting lost in this maelstrom. She awkwardly made her way to the check-in counter, clutching worn bags of homemade food in her hands. In her 68 years, Deborah Smith had seen a lot, but this was the first time she had ever been on a flight. It was clear that a simple cleaning lady could only dream of going to the sky. You can't travel if you can barely make ends meet all your life. But there was no way to refuse. My only son invited me to visit. And it didn't matter that it was to fly to the other side of the country. It didn't matter that all the money would have to be spent. Just to see the wayward but dear boy. Deborah Smith hadn't realized how fast he'd grown up. Yesterday he seemed to be just crawling on the floor. And today he was a grown man, living in a big city. He has a job. What kind of job he has, he won't tell me. But it doesn't matter, as long as he didn't starve, as long as he lived in warmth. And she's baked some guests homemade pies, cutlets, and jam. 3 jars, all her favorites from childhood. I could just imagine how happy Jason would be, how he'd eat his mom's goodies with both cheeks. He looked so gaunt on his last visit. Men can't take care of themselves. Thoughts and memories tangled with one another. And Deborah Smith did not notice how she reached the coveted counter. Her hand had already reached to put the bags on the conveyor belt, but suddenly a young guard stopped her. "Citizen, would you be so kind as to show me what you have there?" Confused, Deborah Smith began to explain the gifts to her son. She tried to open the bag. With shaking hands, the guard pulled one of them open himself, unceremoniously dumping the contents out. "So what do we have here?" He examined each container meticulously. Some kind of pies, some kind of cutlets. And what is this, jam? "Well, open it." The meticulous inspection seemed to take forever. The guard twirled each container in his hands, sniffing, asking Deborah Smith new questions. "Did you cook this yourself? Why is it in a glass container? Are you sure this is just jam?" At the back of the line, murmurs and sighs had already begun. Deborah Smith felt very uncomfortable. She kept apologizing and explaining, but the guard, as if he didn't hear, was stubborn and continued his exhortation. "According to the rules, the transportation of liquids and home-cooked food is restricted," he finally said as he unloaded the last can. "But so be it. As an exception, I'll allow it. But prepare more carefully next time." "Oh, thank you, honey," Deborah Smith exhaled with relief as she carefully stowed the gifts back. Her hands were visibly trembling with excitement. She got the lock on the bag and went on her way. But before she could take a couple steps, an angry voice came from behind her. "Hey, you old thing, hold up." Deborah Smith flinched and turned around. Standing right behind her was a man in an expensive suit, clearly accustomed to command and not recognizing rejection. His hands were covered with bracelets on his wrists, and one of them was wearing a massive watch, his boots shining as if they were lacquered. But most frightening of all were the eyes, prickly, full of contempt and arrogance. "My God, what have I done to him?" Deborah Smith thought confusedly and said calmly, "I'm sorry, I didn't do it on purpose. I was held up by security. I didn't want to disturb anyone. And I don't care whether it was on purpose or not." The man shouted, "Because of you, you old wreck, I might miss my plane. Have you looked at your watch? Do you think that if you have one foot in the grave, you can ruin the lives of others?" The insults came like lashes, scalding like lashes. Deborah Smith stood there, crumpling her bag in her hands and not knowing where to fall from shame. She was used to humiliation in her long life, but she had not seen such blatant, gratuitous rudeness in a long time. "All right, I'll forgive you for the first time," the rich man muttered, apparently tired of his own shouting. "But if you get in my face again, blame yourself," and proudly walked away, accompanied by the frightened looks of the queue. Deborah Smith remained standing as if petrified, confused, destroyed, broken. "Woman, are you all right? Are you feeling ill?" someone's voice asked sympathetically. bringing Deborah Smith out of her stupor. She looked up and saw a young girl in a stewardess uniform standing right in front of her. She looked at her with genuine concern and sympathy. Only now did Deborah Smith realize that she had tears running down her cheeks. Embarrassed, she wiped them away with her handkerchief and murmured, "It's all right, my daughter, it's all right. It's your own fault. I delayed the people with the queue." "Oh, come off it," exclaimed the girl eagerly. "It was he who had no right to treat you like that." A bore and a rude man. Deborah Smith only shook her head. But how could one explain to this pretty young thing what it was like to be humiliated at home and at work all one's life? And even here, in front of strangers, you have to endure abuse. You get used to it, try to accept it, and stop expecting anything else. The girl kept saying something. She seemed to assure him that she would try to talk to the rude man and call him to order. But Deborah Smith was no longer listening, only nodding and thanking crudely. All her thoughts were occupied with the forthcoming flight and the meeting with her son. She did not notice how she finally checked in, got to her seat on the airplane, sat down and buckled herself in, freezing like a little lump. Everything inside was shaking with fear and excitement. Lord help me. I wish I could fly. I wish I could see my son. Deborah Smith closed her eyes. Meanwhile, in the next row, a battle was raging. I will not tolerate inappropriately dressed passengers on my airplane. Get this old woman off this flight immediately. Deborah Smith recognized the voice instantly. The same angry rich man who had insulted her at the airport. Her heart dropped. That's it. It's over. They're going to drop me off. I'm not going anywhere, ran through her mind. But let me, man, she hasn't violated anything. She has a ticket. She checked in. Came the same ringing voice of the stewardess who had interceded for her earlier. Only now there was uncertainty in her tone. Of course she did. Who was she up against? I don't care. Take this bag of bones out. The rich man's voice oozed anger and triumph. It was obvious that he enjoyed the scandal. But Deborah Smith only froze, clutching the armrests of her chair with white fingers. No, not this. She has endured so much, waited so long for this day. Has it all been for nothing? Look, with all due respect, this woman has a right to fly, the stewardess babbled. But there was no longer the same confidence in her voice, only trepidation and a willingness to give up. Who is she to contradict a rich man? Deborah Smith thought bitterly. Kind, but not strong. Now she'll break, she'll give in. But the violent argument was suddenly interrupted by a confident male voice. Pardon me for interfering. This is the crew commander speaking. I will not allow you to disembark a female passenger without good reason. Fasten your seatbelts, we're taking off. The stewardess nimbly rushed to her seat. The rich man grumbled and cursed, but obeyed. The airplane hummed and took off. And Deborah Smith sat there, neither alive nor dead, repeating to herself as if she were running, Lord, help me. Holy Mother of God, you have interceded, and thought through her tears. What a terrible and shameful for this day. It would seem to have done nothing, and the heart as if torn to shreds. I wish I could fly sooner. I wish I could hug my son. All I can do for now is to endure, as I have endured all my life. Deborah Smith was shocked. She had never imagined that a normal flight to her son would turn out to be such a nightmare. Not only did she have to endure a humiliating search and insults from a rude rich man, but now there was a scandal on the airplane. And the stewardess during the flight tried to intercede for the unfortunate woman, several times approached the seat of the rich man, urging him to calm down and not to violate the rules of behavior. But the man would not listen to anything. Who are you to tell me what to do? He shouted in anger. I'm an airline passenger, by the way. Yes, I'll find a way to deal with you. Sue me. The stewardess was embarrassed by the pressure. She knew this angry guy could cause a lot of trouble, but she couldn't leave her grandmother in the lurch. She knew all too well what it was like to be humiliated and helpless. Please, let's settle this peacefully, calmly, she began. But the rich man only grew more agitated. Peacefully? I'll throw you out of your good job, you inept. You found yourself a protector. And one more word, he shrieked. You'll spend your life scrubbing latrines. Like that old poker. What a bore, thought the stewardess bitterly. She was literally shaking with indignation and resentment for her grandmother. But the fear of losing her favorite job was stronger. She had dreamed of becoming a stewardess since childhood. How her mother could spend hours listening to her stories about flying, distant countries, and interesting people. She imagined how she herself would soar above the clouds, giving passengers smiles and comfort. But one day there was grief. Her father, who worked in an aerospace agency, died during the testing of a new airplane. Everything collapsed overnight. Mother, after the tragedy, went into herself, began to drink, and soon went blind. And faded away in the incomplete 40 years. Young Ashley had a hard time, but there was always a favorite grandmother, strict, but infinitely kind and caring. Only thanks to her, Ashley learned, grew up, and achieved her dream. And now, seeing how an innocent old woman was being unfairly insulted, Ashley just couldn't stay away. But she had to keep herself within the guidelines for the sake of her favorite job and her parents' memory. "I'm sorry," she mumbled. The rich man, who'd done such a low thing, grinned triumphantly, pleased with his power. For the rest of the flight, he glared at her with derogatory glances, hurling insults through his teeth. Ashley just clenched her fists until they crunched, until they hurt. She'd find a way to teach the boar a lesson. They landed, luckily, without any problems. Deborah Smith got up from her seat and walked over to Ashley. "Thank you, sweetheart," she said, touching her arm. "You stood up for me. You were kind. God bless you." Tears came to Ashley's throat. She looked at her grandmother's wrinkled, kind face and saw in it the features of her late grandmother. Just as tough, tried and tested, but still loving people. "Don't mention it," Ashley murmured embarrassedly. "Anyone in my position would do that, but you can't let a man be hurt." Deborah Smith shook her head. "Oh dear, I wish everyone would think so. What's your name?" "Ashley." "Well, I gotta go, Ashley. My son's waiting." "He's been waiting." Deborah Smith smiled warmly at Ashley and hurried to the exit, dragging her small bags of goodies. The stewardess felt a sudden urge to protect this alien, but already as if she were her own grandmother. To talk to her, to ask her about her life, maybe even to help her get home. Somehow it seemed that they must meet again. The decision came lightning fast. Ashley had a quick word with the crew chief, asked for an hour off, and sprinted to catch up. Deborah Smith, she didn't know what she was going to say or how she was going to explain her impulse. She just felt she had to. I needed someone to support and encourage this lonely woman. Her grandmother was insulted. Just at least listened to her, hugged her, gave her tea. After all, everyone should have a guardian angel. Deborah Smith was already at the airport exit, looking around in confusion, clearly not sure where to go next. Deborah Smith, Ashley called out to her. Grandma turned around and was surprised to recognize her recent protector. "Ashley, I didn't expect that," she said with a smile. Ashley ran up to her and smiled radiantly. "You know what, Deborah Smith? I'm taking a break here. Why don't you let me walk you out, Jake, with your gifts? You'll get lost in the city." Grandma flapped her arms. "Oh, come on, honey. How could I? You've got work to do." But Ashley immediately grabbed her bags and took her grandmother under her arm. "How are you doing? The most important thing is to be a good person. You've been through so much today. Now it's my turn to take care of you." Deborah Smith only shook her head in admiration and unexpected joy. Rachel was already drawing her forward and chattering merrily about all sorts of things. Rachel and Deborah Smith walked leisurely through the streets of the unfamiliar town, occasionally checking the address on a piece of paper. Grandmother was a surprisingly talkative companion. As if sensing a kindred spirit, she eagerly shared her memories. "Rachel, dear, if you knew how much I love my little boy," she said with a sad smile. "He's a good, kind boy, but he's a little boy who can't sit still." She began to tell me that she had adopted Brendan when she was quite old. The lonely cleaning lady liked the orphan very much with his keen, intelligent eyes and simple-mindedness. And Deborah Smith herself very much wanted to find the meaning of life, to warm, caress a tiny, lonely creature. All was well at first. Brendan grew up an intelligent, affectionate boy. The soul did not dote in the foster mom, and everything helped. Only in high school we somehow fell apart. Deborah Smith sighed, recalling those difficult years. He got mixed up with a bad crowd, started skipping school and coming home late. I coaxed him, I scolded him. I cried. But he didn't give a damn. I thought he'd come to his senses in the army, but he didn't. Brendan never settled down. He took odd jobs, got involved in some dubious ventures. After that, he was like a tumbleweed across the country. He would go fishing in the Far East or to construction in Siberia. And all to no avail. And now he's probably planning to go to the end of the world for some other adventure. Deborah Smith splashed her hands. I'm in my 70s. I have no health, and I have to take care of him as best I can, because I'm the only one he has. Rachel listened in silence to these sorrows and saw that, in spite of everything, the mother loved her stupid son. She loved him self-consciously, blindly, and was ready to give her last. And Rachel felt sorry for this kind, tortured woman to the point of tears. He wanted to do something to ease her lot, to comfort and support her. Soon they found themselves on the right street. They found the house where the rebellious Brendan and his partner lived. Deborah Smith timidly rang the doorbell, holding her breath. 1 minute, another, no one opened the door. "Oh my," she muttered in surprise. "He's not here. What a fidget, God forbid." At last there was some rustling and mumbling behind the door. Then the lock clicked. A young woman appeared on the doorstep, her hair disheveled and puffy, her gait swaying. "What do you want?" she squeezed out hoarsely, glaring vaguely at the strangers. She reeked of booze and smoke. Deborah Smith staggered backward, startled by what she saw, but quickly pulled herself together and babbled on, smiling harder. "Hello, Sydney. Didn't you recognize me? I'm your mother. I thought I'd come and see you. Here, I brought some goodies." She held out a bag of food. But her daughter-in-law made no attempt to let the guests in. "Mommy's here," she said angrily, "and for nothing. Your sorrowful son is gone. He's gone to work, his precious. And I'm all alone here." And Sydney launched into an angry tirade, every now and then breaking into a shout. Brendan was spending all his money on himself, going out with women, and he didn't even give her a second thought. If she'd known what kind of asshole she'd run into, she never would have gotten involved with him. Deborah Smith stood there, clutching the unfortunate bag, and her sister-in-law, on the rampage, began to swing, trying to snatch the bag. A little more and definitely would have hit her mother-in-law in the face, not disdaining anything. But Rachel couldn't stand it, stepped forward, shielded her grandmother, and glared angrily at the raging fury. "You should be ashamed of yourselves. Deborah Smith has come to see you and has brought your young man some presents, and you've got your fists on her. How can you yell at an elderly person?" She seemed to be jammed on them, and from the unexpected rebuff, she started with a new vigor, spitting saliva and profanity. She called the old woman names, calling her 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 names. Rachel also raised her voice in response, trying to calm her down, but to no avail. They argued on the doorstep for about 5 minutes, until Deborah became completely unhinged. Deborah Smith slowly pulled Rachel aside. "Daughter, come on, let's get out of here. It's probably not the right time," she said. But she didn't give up, looking regretfully at her unhappy grandmother. There was no point in arguing further, only to upset Deborah Smith even more. She picked up the bags, put her arm around her shoulders, and led her away from the inhospitable house. Behind them, Jason was still cursing and cursing at the drunken Jason. But Rachel wasn't listening. Staring ahead, Sydney was frantically thinking of ways to help her new friend. She couldn't leave her alone in a strange city in such a depressed state, could she? Maybe convince her to go home, or try to find Brendan again, because she should try to talk to him. It was as if Deborah Smith had read her mind. Sighing heavily, she muttered, "All the same, we must go." Rachel replied, Come, Deborah Smith, let's go and find your Brendan. He won't get away from us. We'll have a heart-to-heart talk." Grandmother gratefully took Rachel's hand and pressed her lips together stubbornly. "Yes, Rachel, if this is the case, we have to go through with it. I'll go to work, I'll be patient, but I'll look him in the eye." And Deborah Smith strode resolutely forward, clutching her long-suffering bag of goodies. The stubborn grandmother, in spite of her fatigue and recent shocks, was moving toward her goal with remarkable steadfastness. Soon they were standing at the door of the firm where Deborah Smith had said that her troublemaking Brendan worked. Shyly, she opened the heavy door and peered inside. Rachel followed, looking around curiously. She was struck by the sparseness of the furnishings: bare walls, dusty windows, ancient furniture, and no one around but the emptiness of the corridor. Suddenly, footsteps and loud voices came from around the corner. Deborah Smith roused herself, prepared to rush toward her son, but the words of greeting froze on her lips. From around the corner, still muttering to himself, came the rich, scandalized man from that very flight. The same boorish and rude man who had abused the poor grandmother. Deborah Smith froze. The blood rushed to her face, and the rich man froze, half-stepping as he saw them. "Who do I see?" He grinned, his lips curling into a gloating smirk. "The old witch is here. What an insistent one." A young man in a cheap suit with frightened eyes peered over his shoulder. Deborah Smith gasped, clamping her hand over her mouth. "Brendan. Sonny." The boy jerked as if struck by a blow. A storm of emotions flashed across his face: surprise, confusion, fear, and even something akin to shame. But in the eyes of the rich man standing next to him, there was already unconcealed rage. "What kind of circus is this?" he shouted, glaring at the confused guard. "Why the hell did you bring your mother here, you idiot?" And this defender of the poor and the weak, he shifted his contemptuous gaze to the pale Rachel. Brendan staggered under his superior's threatening shout, pulling his head into his shoulders. I didn't call you. They came to you," he mumbled. "You're right. Get out of here," the rich man shouted, sputtering. "Now, before I call the police." He turned on his heels and sped away, muttering angrily to himself. And poor Brendan stood in the middle of the hallway, staring at his mother. "You've got to be kidding me," he breathed out, shrugging nervously. "But who asked you to come here and fight with my boss?" "I didn't know." Deborah Smith began to babble, clutching her bag in her hands. Deborah Smith looked at Rachel with a startled look as Brendan lashed out at her. This was already too much. Brendan's temper flared. Fear for himself must have overpowered any vestiges of kinship. "You're always meddling where you're not wanted." "Are you going to get me fired from my job?" Deborah Smith froze, stunned by this sudden outburst, and her grandson cried more and more. "That's it. I've had enough. I don't want you here. You're nothing but trouble." He grabbed the bag from his mother and threw it in Rachel's direction. "What are you looking at? Take your grandmother and get the both of you out of here." Rachel picked up the bag. Deborah Smith stood stone still. Only her lips moved soundlessly and large tears rolled down her cheeks. Rachel's heart clenched with a pang of pity and anger. But it was useless to resent her. How to reach a man in whom fear had overpowered conscience and kindred feelings? Rachel only gently put her arm around Deborah Smith's shoulders and gently led her away from that horrible place, away from the stiffness of her own grandson. On they flew in heavy silence. Deborah Smith was sobbing quietly, holding a wet handkerchief in her hands. Rachel clutched her palm tightly, not knowing how to comfort her. What could be said? Any words would be meaningless or false. The only thing Rachel could do was to negotiate with the crew to allow Deborah Smith to board the flight for free, given her age and circumstances. The pilots and flight attendants readily complied, no one wanting to traumatize the poor woman further. The whole flight, Deborah Smith sat a pale shadow, staring blankly at one point, only occasionally muttering to herself, "What in God's name have I done?" Rachel pulled away from the curious passengers, trying to shield her grandmother from unnecessary attention and questioning. On the ground, Deborah Smith suddenly stirred and grabbed Rachel's hand. "Rachel, darling, thank you for everything. I don't know what I would have done without you. I'm sorry for causing so much trouble," she sobbed, wiping away her tears. Rachel threw her arms around her, desperate for some kind of support. "Come on, Deborah, don't apologize." "For what? I'm so glad I could help you. Just hang in there. Things will get better, you'll see." As she said goodbye, Grandma slipped Rachel a slip of paper with her address and phone number. It's just in case. Maybe fate would bring them together again. Rachel hurriedly wrote down her address. Deborah Smith left, leaning heavily on her wand. Rachel stared after her, holding the sheet in her hands. It was too much for her to part, knowing that her grandmother was returning to an empty house all alone. She couldn't shake the pangs of guilt and helplessness. She wanted so much to do something more for Deborah, to help, to support her. But alas, it was time to return to her duties at the airport, to new flights and passengers. She took one last longing glance at the departing figure and hurried to board. Her heart ached with an acute sense of foreboding. It was as if Rachel knew that their destinies with Deborah Smith would cross more than once. And what if the next meeting was no less dramatic and bitter? After all, Rachel had noticed with what sharpened malice and calculation the rich man was looking at her poor grandmother, as if he were mentally preparing a new attack on her. And for some reason it seemed to Rachel that Brendan would have to pay for it. After all, why would this guy stay in the service of such a scumbag? This was clearly not a simple security office, but a real hotbed of crime, where disenfranchised subordinates worked for their powerful bosses. Oh, this is not good, Rachel thought for the umpteenth time, leaning back tiredly in the airplane seat. She smelled trouble and knew she would have to get involved in this ugly story again. After all, she just couldn't let it go. Deborah Smith had no right to. Rachel sighed and covered her eyes. There was still a long way to go before disaster struck, and in the meantime she could nap for an hour or two, gather her strength for new challenges. And there would be new trials. She had no doubt about that. The airplane hummed, taking her away from the city, where a part of her soul remained, to the place where her life was waiting for her. On the way home, Rachel found herself thinking hard. The story of Deborah Smith never left her mind, how unfair life could be to good people. Her own fate, however, seemed about to strike another blow. When she entered the apartment, Rachel stood on the threshold as if struck by thunder. In the living room, her fiancé John was sitting on the couch, cuddled up with some girl. They were selflessly kissing, not paying any attention to the world around them. Rachel's eyes darkened with confusion and resentment. In her own home in broad daylight. What kind of circus is this? She squeezed out, struggling to speak. John shuddered and bounced away from Deborah Smith's poopy-haired girlfriend. She wrinkled her nose in annoyance but didn't get up from the couch. She gave Rachel an indifferent glance and snickered. Oh, come on, your husband is not the first day on the ladies. Why throw tantrums? And you can see that Rachel from the shock cannot utter another word. The girl got up reluctantly and headed for the exit. She turned around at the door and gave a final glance. Claire. You don't think I should go to her, do you? You want to have some fun? Xiao. And she was gone. And Rachel was still standing there like she'd swallowed her tongue. She couldn't get her head around what was happening. John quickly came to his senses, showing genuine remorse on his face, and rushed to his fiancée. Rachel, honey, I'm sorry. I'm out of my mind, for God's sake. I don't know what came over me. Never again, I give you my word. He tried to hug and kiss her, to justify himself. But Rachel's fiancé squeamishly pulled away. Pain and rage mixed with disgust boiled up inside. Get out. She gritted her teeth, barely able to keep from screaming. Now, before I break your face, and take your things so you won't be here anymore. John shrank back and tried to mumble something in his own defense, but when he saw the look of anger on Rachel's face, he realized it wouldn't work. It would be the worst thing in the world to mess with someone like that. He lowered his nose and began to throw his things into his bag. You're a fool, Rachel, he muttered, rummaging in the closet. Men go out, and it's okay. And you're so hysterical. So what if I was with a woman? Not in a brothel. She kept silent with her arms crossed over her chest, and dreamed only of one thing, that this nightmare would end quickly, that her eyes would never see this traitor and traitor again. Finally, the door slammed shut behind John. There was a ringing silence in the apartment. Emptiness. Rachel sank to the couch without strength. Tears choked in her throat, constricted with a cramp. So much for love to the grave. So much for loyalty. There was a reason she was so reluctant to get attached. Well, that's fine. Better to be alone than with someone like John. The next few days passed like a blur. Rachel mechanically ate, slept, went to work, and in her soul it was as if a black hole had formed, sucking in all thoughts and feelings. She forbade herself to think about Killian, chased away all memories of him. But it didn't make it any easier. At least no one at work asked her questions, seeing her gloomy, detached face. Colleagues sympathetically looked at her and nodded sympathetically, saying that she would change. The days dragged on in an endless, dreary succession. Rachel often thought back, wondering how Deborah Smith had settled in, whether she was all right. She wanted to call, but at the last moment stopped herself. She didn't want to reopen fresh wounds, to remind herself of the failed meeting with her son. And then Deborah Smith showed up. Rachel was just getting ready for her evening flight when the doorbell rang demandingly. Grandmother stood on the doorstep, sorrowful and trembling. "Oh my God, she's here. She's definitely on her last legs," Rachel thought to herself. "What happened?" she asked. Troubled Deborah Smith breathed out and almost fell, but was barely picked up by Rachel. When the water and sedative were finished, Deborah Smith, stammering and choking back tears, broke the terrible news. Brendan had been arrested, accused of some horrible crime, threatened with a huge sentence. And he's not guilty of anything. She knows that. That creep who was abusing us on the airplane. He set it all up, whispered Deborah Smith, wringing her wet handkerchief in her hands. "I know it, Rachel. Do you remember when he looked at us like a wolf? So he got his revenge, Herod. He wrote a statement, accused him of all the deadly sins, the one who didn't plow, and the cases inside. Of course, nothing surprising, this scumbag could not just let the offense go. She quite believed he was the one who'd set the guy up for some dirty purpose. After all, he'd been nasty to his mom, and she'd hit him hard, but to rot in jail for nothing." Rachel's heart ached with sympathy and anger. "Don't cry, Deborah Smith," she said firmly. "We'll think of something. We'll get through this." Rachel had no idea what she could think of, but she knew for sure that she could not sit idly by. She had to act, to fight for the sake of the poor boy and his grief-stricken mother. After all, she had the main trump card on her hands, the opportunity to get close to Jeremy Winston. Since he was now a regular on her flights, she could get him to come clean, nail him to the wall, make him confess to his meanness. Luckily, the nearest flight was the one the damn rich guy usually took. Jeremy Winston was his name. Rachel was determined to take the bull by the horns this time. And of course, she was keeping Deborah Smith. Almost all the way to the airport, Rachel was preparing for the decisive conversation. She was going through all possible arguments in her head, choosing the right words, even composed a farewell speech in case the rich man would take revenge and she would be fired. But all plans went to shit. As soon as Rachel entered the VIP lounge and came face to face with Jeremy Winston, he was sitting in a chair, writing something in a notebook. "You're a fledgling," he said, glancing casually at Rachel. "Are you here to defend the poor again? There doesn't seem to be anyone else." The mocking tone and smirk of the man's sneer made Rachel instantly furious. What kind of politeness and arguments are there? This bore immediately signed his name to all of his art. The only thing to expect from him was the truth. "What do you mean, no one?" "Links." "With what?" Rachel blurted out with rage in her voice. "And Brendan Adams, Deborah Smith's son, who you framed, he's behind bars now because of you." Jeremy Winston froze before his fork reached his mouth. Then he laughed loudly and mockingly. "Tina, you're so hot. What's this got to do with me? You didn't hit your head, did you, beautiful?" His insolence made my eyes darken. No, that's just out of line. Such a cold-blooded, shameless lie. "You know very well," she whispered, clenching her fists. "It was you who filed the report against him. You wanted revenge to frame him." Jeremy Winston stopped laughing. He gave Rachel a scornful look and said coldly, "Honey, I think you're being paranoid. Why would I want to frame some security guard? I have nothing else to do. And it's none of your damn business. Go meet the passengers, if that's what you want." He looked away, squeamishly, indicating that the conversation was over. And Rachel felt as if something inside her had snapped. "Oh, is that it? You don't know anything?" She thought frantically, walking away. "Well, let's see how you'll sing when I've got you up against the wall. When I tell the whole world what a scoundrel you are." She had no idea how she was going to get the bastard. But she knew for sure that she would get what she wanted, no matter what. For now it was necessary to gather her thoughts and urgently think of a plan of action. The first thing to do was to reassure Deborah Smith, to give her hope. And then there would be a way to put pressure on the rich man. "You've got the wrong girl, you bastard," Rachel repeated stubbornly to herself as she stepped into the airplane. Determination, anger gave her strength. She knew she would save Brendan. For the sake of her grandmother, for the sake of justice, and for the sake of her own belief that evil must be punished. Jeremy Winston would regret this. Of that she had no doubt. Deborah Smith was beside herself with grief and worry. Rachel did her best to comfort her, to inspire her with hope. How could a mother sit still when she knew that her own child was suffering innocently? They spent hours in the kitchen. Rachel made plans, thought of options. Grandmother once again told her how Brendan was a good boy, but only a careless one. And at the end of it, she was always in tears, bemoaning the fate of the wicked. "Why is he being punished like this, Rachel?" She sobbed, clutching her wet handkerchief in her hands. "He was a fool, a young man. He was foolish enough to get mixed up with that scoundrel. Is that what you should go to jail for?" Rachel realized that it was not Brendan's foolishness or his careless connections, but the meanness and vindictiveness of the man he had had the misfortune to cross. Or rather, not himself, but his mother, by her integrity and independence. "Well, nothing," Rachel thought gloomily, stroking her grandmother's shaking hands. "I'll get you yet. I'll remember everything, the abusive grandmother, and the frame-up with her son." But all plans for revenge were shattered when Deborah Smith began to feel ill one evening. She had suffered too many shocks. In the last few days, her aged heart had failed. Her body shuddering like a hunted bird, Rachel paced around the apartment, unable to find a place for her anxiety. The paramedics arrived surprisingly quickly, but as they placed the unconscious Deborah Smith on a stretcher, the faces of the team were glum and worried. "Let's get her to the emergency room," the doctor said, without looking at Rachel. "She's in serious condition. Are you a relative?" "IA," mumbled the dazed girl. Rachel was in a daze. She rushed from corner to corner to corner of the hospital corridor, trying time and again to enter the intensive care unit. They wouldn't let her in, of course. All she could do was wait and pray that Deborah Smith would pull through. By the end of the first 24 hours, spent almost without sleep or food, Rachel resembled her own shadow. Dark circles under her eyes. Her cheeks were sunken. There was a deep crease in her forehead. Even the most cheerful nurses looked at her with pity. It was then that the doctor who had attended Deborah Smith appeared in the hallway, a tall, stately man in his 40s with piercing gray eyes and a strong-willed chin. Rachel rushed toward him. "Well, how is she?" The doctor felt sorry for the girl. He cast her an attentive, studying look. "Condition is stable to serious. The crisis has passed. But tell me, are you definitely related to her?" Rachel was confused for a moment, not knowing how to explain. "Yes, it's just that she and I are very close. I should be close." The doctor frowned. It was obvious he was hesitating, not knowing if he could trust a girl he didn't know. But something in Rachel's face, in her haggard eyes, seemed to convince him. "All right," he sighed. "Let's go. Just briefly and very gently. She can't be worried." For the next few days, Rachel practically took up residence in the hospital. Day and night she sat by Deborah Smith's bedside and helped the nurses. She went home to sleep only for a couple of hours, and then rushed back, afraid to miss even the slightest change. The Dr. Jeremy Winston at first squinted disapprovingly, but, seeing the devotion of the girl, gradually began to talk to Rachel for a long time, to explain the features of treatment, and even consult on some issues. It turned out that they had a lot in common. Jeremy also lost his parents early and chose a profession to help people, and their characters were similar, purposeful, uncompromising. It came out, of course, that purely business communication turned into friendship, and romance was not far behind. Jeremy would bring Rachel coffee and homemade pies, a strange hobby for a doctor cooking. Then she would meet him after a night duty, tired and a little killed. And they would go for a walk in the nearest park. Deborah Smith was recovering slowly but surely, but she refused to go home. Rachel herself had grown fond of her grandmother. She realized that Deborah could not be alone in four walls. Now she would wither from longing for her son Brendan. So Deborah moved in with Rachel. but not for good. She rented out her apartment. She began to save money to help Brendan, then went to the detention center to her son, then to lawyers. Rachel could barely hold back her tears. True, while Deborah was ill, she was fired from the firm where she worked as a cleaner. It's understandable the office should be clean, but Grandma was still terribly upset. And here did not please, and there did not come out, bitterly whispered Sydney, dropping tears in a cup of tea. Why should I have such a share? Rachel, wherever you go, there's a wedge. Rachel hugged her and stroked her gray head, soothing her as best she could. It's okay, we'll get through this. Your health is the main thing, and the rest will come. And feverishly thought how to help. She couldn't do much on her paycheck alone, and Deborah had to carry Brendan's packages and pay the rent. Jeremy Winston was supportive, offering to find Deborah Smith a lighter job with a flexible schedule. Rachel put her arms around him and pressed herself against him, her throat constricted with the sensation. God, Jeremy, what would I do without you? You're a miracle, not a man. He grinned, kissing her gently on the top of her head. Rachel, what kind of miracle? Helping people close to you is normal, humanly speaking. And he looked at her in a way that made her chest squeeze with happiness and pain. Lord, did I really find mine? Despite all the loss, the turmoil, despite all the injustice of the world, she wrapped her arms around his neck and reached up for a kiss. There were still many challenges ahead, but now, at this moment, Rachel believed that they could do it. Together they could make mountains for the truth, for love, and for the fragile hope that it was stronger. Rachel's mind was consumed with worrying about Deborah Smith. Most of her earnings now went to her for medicine, food, small needs. She didn't think much of herself, as long as grandmother didn't need anything. At first, Deborah Smith was reluctant, shy. Oh, come on, Rachel, don't. How am I supposed to pay it back? I'm not working now, she repeated. But Rachel wouldn't listen. What's the use, Deborah? She was genuinely surprised. You became like my mother, and you don't think about mothers you don't have to. They just help them from the bottom of their hearts. Grandmother, tears ran up, gustily hugged her named daughter, and no longer argued, only prayed. Rachel was annoyed that because of her, the old wench young denies herself everything. But Rachel was adamant, even though she herself had a little more than a share of macaroni and tea with dried bread. She didn't complain. Jason wasn't discouraged. Of course, he knew what was going on. He tried to slip her money more than once, but Rachel just waved it away. And you're the same way, with all those handouts. I'm fine. I'll get by somehow. But Jason was persistent. One day he interrogated Rachel, and in the end he found out about her financial problems, her worries about Brendan, and her fear of the rich, abusive man. Rachel, he lamented, hugging her tightly. But why didn't you say so in the first place? I want to help. You can't carry everything on your shoulders alone. They sat in the kitchen that night, drinking tea and discussing the situation. Jason, as always, was a treasure trove of good advice and rational ideas. Okay, he said, stirring the sugar in his cup thoughtfully. Brendan has to be taken out, that's a fact. Otherwise the kid will get killed in the detention center. But how? There's no evidence against him. The only thing that's holding up hope for him is your bigwig statement. What do you mean? I don't get it. Rachel was staring straight ahead. If he fabricated the case against Brendan, he's the only one who can close it. We need to get in touch with him, probe him. Maybe we can appeal to his conscience or make a deal. Rachel hummed bitterly, her eyes downcast, hiding the unsolicited tears. But what conscience, Jason? He's got a stone for a heart. How can you get past that? But tonight, Jeremy Winston set himself up. He called Rachel on the video link. He smirked. It was a short, rather nasty conversation. Look, Camille, I may change my mind about taking a statement on your innocent Brendan, but not for nothing. You're going to have to work for it. So here's the deal, you'll be my mistress. Your Brendan goes free. If he doesn't, he'll put you in jail. It's up to you. I'll give you 24 hours to think about it. And he's out. And Rachel's mind went foggy. It took a lot of effort not to yell, not to use a lot of profanity against the bastard. And she burst into tears. She sobbed bitterly, hopelessly against Jason. He was worried, stroking Rachel's head, whispering affectionately, and then he suddenly woke up and snapped his fingers. "Rachel, let's blackmail him. You know, you're rich, man." "Blackmail him with what? Are you out of your mind?" Jason grinned. There was a sly twinkle in his eye. "I have an idea. Rachel, he seems to like you, doesn't he? Well, maybe we should meet him, play a little prank on him. Something, you know, fatal." Rachel listened, feeling something bad stirring in her soul. Scary, embarrassing, but at the same time daring and exhilarating. It's a tempting idea. "You mean?" she began tentatively. And it was Jason who picked up on it eagerly. "Go on a date with him, flirt a little, and set up a secret camera somewhere so he'd lick himself and say things he couldn't get away with. And he'll start hitting on you, of course. That's when you catch him red-handed." He was so engrossed that he jumped up and ran around the kitchen, waving his arms. Rachel looked at him and couldn't believe her eyes. What was this, her quiet, sensible Brendan suggesting she lie to a man for blackmail? It was surreal. But it was a good plan. Unconventional, risky. But it could have an effect. Jeremy Winston's not going to be able to get away with it. He'd have to take the application. Otherwise, you could ruin your career or go to jail for harassment. "Okay," Rachel exhaled, feeling her heart racing. He had only one question: where was the camera? And with good resolution so he could see his face. Brendan smiled enigmatically, and the next day brought a flat rectangle about the size of a pack of cigarettes. "Where's the state-of-the-art spy tech? I got it cheap from an IT guy I know. It's got enough battery life for 5 hours. Write down your ideas. So go for it, girlfriend." Vindictiveness was with her. Setting up the camera at the hotel had to be done in a terrible hurry. Rachel purposely showed up early to the reserved Sheraton luxury suite, 2 bedrooms, bed, fireplace, and other frills. She had hidden the camera in a decorative niche. It would have a great view of the entire room. Jeremy Winston showed up for his date slightly inebriated. He ordered a bottle of champagne and fruit and grinned carnivorously. And Rachel was circling him, making eyes at him. Only it turned everything upside down. The calculation was right. The rich man quickly floated from drinking and flirting. He started kissing, grabbing Rachel by all places, and she squealed. The guests giggled and poured sparkling wine. When Jeremy Winston became quite bold and began to voice his obscene desires aloud, Rachel gently but decisively freed herself from his clutches, depicted on her face extreme embarrassment. "Oh, excuse me, I have to go to the ladies' room," she said, and flew out of the room with an arrow. Only in the hallway did she catch her breath. I think it worked. The next day, the tape with the ambiguous footage was on the investigator's desk. He shook his head glumly at first, but the evidence was there. A drunken rich man is so and blazing with lust, grabbing the struggling girl and talking all sorts of obscenities. It's pure molestation, that's for sure. Brendan was released after a couple days for lack of evidence. Jeremy Winston, on the other hand, was taken to task by law enforcement. He, of course, threatened all the punishments of heaven. Even the lawyers they hired, they couldn't do anything about it. The videotape is authentic. So are the rich guy's fingerprints on the glasses. And even DNA from the cigarette butts in the ashtray. Rachel and Brendan followed the story from afar, following the news and the gossip of acquaintances and chuckling furtively, exchanging understanding glances. Wow, how did everything work out? Just unreal. Brendan smirked, pulling Rachel close to him. Deserve to be happy. Don't dig another man a hole, you'll fall in it yourself. Bite you, you creepy crawly bastard, she squinted blissfully, resting her cheek against his chest. She couldn't believe her happiness. Was it really over? Were there only cloudless days ahead in the arms of her lover? There was no doubt in her mind that Brendan was her destiny. They'd been through too much together. Their sudden love was too strong to withstand fear, pain, and dirty backstage games. And Deborah Smith seemed pleased with her future son-in-law. She saw that her daughter was in safe hands, that her chosen one would not hurt her, would not betray her. One evening, when Brendan was about to go home, the old woman suddenly rose resolutely from her chair and took him by the hand. "Son," she whispered, and her voice trembled with excitement. "I can see how much you love Rachel. Thank you for not leaving us in the lurch, for for helping us with all your heart." She brushed away a stingy tear and smiled brightly, enlightened. "Be a good husband, okay? And I'll pray for you now day and night. Happiness to you, my dears." And she crossed the dazed Brendan 3 times. And Rachel looked at them from the side and almost cried with emotion. There it was, the real blessing of happiness, of a long, honest life. Now Rachel sees herself at liberty. And Deborah Smith seems to be well, and all is well at work. Without noticing it herself, Rachel has become accustomed during this tumultuous time to taking care of others. It seemed so easy and right for someone else. She was afraid to get attached. She thought she wouldn't open her heart to people after Killian. I thought maybe that was the point of life, to fly solo, where no one was needed. God, what a fool I was. Only now, having found a real family, Rachel realized here it is. Happiness is not in money, not in the career, but to love and be loved, to feel your need, indispensability for those who are near. "Beauty, what are you thinking about?" Playfully pushed her in the side Andrew. "Are you thinking of running away from me?" Rachel woke up from her thoughts and with a smile pressed herself against her lover. She cupped his neck with her hands and kissed his nose. "Don't even think about getting rid of me." Andrew smiled happily, pulled her to him and whispered in her ear. "I wasn't going to. You're my bird, my guiding star. You say. I love you. I can't stand it," he whispered, sending shivers down her spine. His heart beat in a frantic rhythm, each time as if it were the first time. Their lips came together in a long kiss. Outside the windows, the summer twilight was thickening. Crickets chirped in the grass, and the two lovers stood on the threshold of their common future, and were not afraid of anything, for now they were one. In the next room, Deborah Smith was serenely slumbering in her sleep, peaceful. The sorrows were behind them, and only joy lay ahead. After all, the grown-up and quiet Paul had come home. Bitter experience taught him a lot, and patience, and responsibility for his actions. Now all his free time he devoted to caring for his mother, helped around the house, took her for walks, to church. Grandmother could not be pleased with such changes. Every now and then she furtively wiped away tears of emotion, looking at him. Where will her son go now from loving hearts and caring hands? He would live like a man, work, atone for past mistakes. And Jeremy Winston, by all rights and wrongs, tried to hush up the scandal with harassment through trusted persons, came to Rachel. They say, "Take the statement, refuse to testify, and you will be rewarded." She agreed and even went to the investigator, but kept the videotape just in case. "Just try to touch us again," she caressingly warned the rich man who had turned white with impotent anger. Jeremy Winston gritted his teeth, but backed down. He had too much to lose because of his fleeting lust. Rachel was triumphant. So much for the ride. Know our people. Life was slowly returning to peacefulness. Almost every day Rachel met with Andrew, they went to the movies, or to a cafe to sit in a cafe, and even in the evening they wandered the streets, holding hands and talking about everything in the world, remembering the past trials. They made plans for the future. In their chests there was confidence. Now everything will definitely be fine. One evening Andrew took a velvet box out of his pocket, and a month later they were married. The same day as Brendan and his chosen one, Olivia, Tanya's partner and friend, a fragile blue-eyed flight attendant. They met at Rachel's house and got to talking. It turned out they had a lot in common. And when Olive learned the details of the story, she was completely taken in. They've been together ever since. Deborah Smith at this double wedding was more radiant than the young, spinning like a Yule log, helping with the preparations and receiving guests. At one point she pulled Rachel into a corner and kissed her on both cheeks. "Rachel, darling, it's all you with your efforts before God cheers for you. What happiness you have brought us." Grandmother cried from the excess of feelings, but immediately left, again hurrying away. "But I'm still running. The guests are waiting." Bitter, and plunged into the hustle and bustle of the wedding. Rachel did not see her off, feeling her throat tighten with tears. God, could she have imagined such an ending 6 months ago, that so many loving hearts would be united in one day in one registry office? And did she think that life would give her a real family? She didn't believe it. Annie, Brendan's ex-fiancée, showed up at the wedding, the same one who'd been rude the other day, and Deborah Smith drunkenly made an ugly row across the room. claiming she was pregnant with her fiancé's child. The guests were stunned, whispered. The young woman was upset. But the groom only squeamishly wrinkled his nose. Oh, give up these stories. A year ago, and the couple was all boiling hot. She could not come to terms with the breakup, kept sobbing in her voice and tried to faint. That's when Andrew came up with a brilliant idea, and let's send the mommy-to-be to a blood test. Or at least a pregnancy test. I'm a doctor, by the way. He winked at Rachel, and she thanked him for her husband, who was not only handsome, but also smart. He figured out how to get her to come clean. Annie was about to get out of here, but she didn't. She had the wrong people. They rounded up the grief-stricken bride, put her in a cab, and took her straight to the nearest clinic. A couple of tests, and there was no pregnancy. Just a false alarm caused by alcohol abuse. The hapless liar only had to retreat in shame. And the wedding party went on until late into the night. Dancing, songs, laughter, kisses furtively, and endless hugs. Happiness was running wild. Rachel and Andrew often recalled that stormy, crazy day and agreed that there was no better start to married life. How could you think of an old woman having a baby? Ashley, a blonde girl of 13, stood on the porch of the school and watched as her friend Emily, who was in the same class as her, talked to her older brother. Ashley dreamed now of being in her classmate's shoes and having a conversation with the guy. The girl had fallen in love with her friend's brother Jason last year, and she didn't even realize how it happened. Ashley just woke up one day with thoughts of this teenager, and after that she thought about the guy all the time. As soon as the girl realized that she had fallen in love, she started giving signs of attention to the high schooler. She planted unsigned love notes, but soon she, as a secret admirer, was exposed, and ridicule from Jason's buddy followed. Ashley felt strongly about it at the time. However, her mother Mary, who knew about her daughter's crush, told her to keep her mind off the guy. You're still young, and it's far away. You're not in love, just a crush. As time passes, you'll laugh at your own crush. But a year had passed, and Ashley was still in love with Jason. And now she was standing there watching Emily's friend talking to her brother. Ashley, watching the conversation between the two, dreamed about how her lover would come to her and confess his feelings to her. The girl noticed her friend and her brother heading towards her. Ashley felt a slight shiver go down her spine. She tried to pull herself together. In the meantime, the pair approached her, and Jason said with a good-natured smile, "Hey you need to grow up a little." And then, looking back at the older kids, maybe you're expecting those words from me. But my sister has already told me that you are withering from unrequited love. Ashley, hearing those words, shuddered involuntarily, as if from a blow. The girl looked at her friend reproachfully, and then she turned and ran away. At the moment, she didn't care that she was acting like a cranky little girl. Ashley was annoyed by her lover's words. She was also hurt that her friend was secretly talking to her brother about her. Ashley ran and heard Emily asking her to stop and talk. However, the girl was not responding to her mate's cries. Ashley wanted to run home now, lock herself in her room, and let the tears flow, which soon happened. When the girl calmed down, she made a vow to herself that she would not talk to her friend again, and she also promised herself that she would tear her love for Jason out of her heart and would not look in his direction again. And when Mary's mother came home from work, Ashley pronounced to her, "I don't hang out with Emily anymore. So if she comes over, just tell her I'm not here." "What'd you get?" "It's no big deal. You'll make up in a couple days. By the way, what was the fight about? What was it about?" "It's a long conversation. Emily's a traitor." "That's a pretty big thing to say. You can't make such serious accusations against a man, especially since Emily is your friend. Why don't you tell me what happened?" Mary said affectionately and sat down next to her daughter. Ashley looked at her mother carefully, then excitedly told her what had happened. The woman listened to her daughter, and then she patted her head and said softly, "Your friend cares about you. She wanted to do you a good favor. Emily thought that talking to her brother about you might help draw the boy's attention to you. But what her friend didn't realize was that you can't command the heart. If Jason doesn't care about you, There's nothing you can do about it." Mary paused for a moment. Then, with a sad sigh, she said, "You surprised me, daughter. I thought you weren't thinking about Jason anymore. You're getting a little secretive. Or is it my own fault that I don't notice anything but work?" "Mom, don't say that," Ashley said. "I'm not hiding anything from you, I just don't want to worry you. You really work so hard that I don't want you to worry about me. Taking care of you is the best part for me. You're the only one I've got. And you have to work hard for one simple reason: you need money. Your grandparents on my side of the family are long gone. Your father divorced me 2 years ago and forgot about the obligation to pay child support. And your grandparents on your daddy's side don't need you. Why not? You see, daughter, in some families it happens that parents have 2 children and one child becomes the favorite. That's what happened in your daddy's family. He didn't become a favorite from mom and dad, and as a result they don't need you as a granddaughter. If before the divorce with your father they still congratulated you on your birthday, now it does not happen. And you know it yourself. Mom, you always told me that you and Dad got divorced because that's how life works. How does it happen?" her daughter asked her mother in a low voice. Ashley had longed to know the answer, but there had never been the right occasion for such a conversation. Mary sighed softly, put her arm around her and said, "You're getting older and older every day, and I don't even notice it. Well, I'll answer your question. Your father fell in love with another woman who gave him a child, the son he dreamed of. So he made a choice, but not in our direction. Just don't blame him or judge him. Life is complicated. You'll realize that later." After talking to her mom, Ashley felt a lot better. She even took her mind off the fact that she was upset with her friend. The girl kept thinking about the relationship between her parents, and also pondered how she would act in her mother's situation. And in the evening, when Emily called to apologize, Ashley interrupted her and said that she was no longer offended, but she added, "Now it's nothing personal. I won't trust you, or you'll tell the whole world." Time moved on, and now Ashley was 16. The New Year's Eve ball was coming up. The girl carefully thought over her closet for these holidays. She hoped that her friend's brother would come to the ball. Ashley told Emily that she had invited Jason to the event, and Ashley, against all odds, secretly continued to love Jason all this time. And now the girl is already in the auditorium where the New Year's Eve ball has begun. She looks around, hoping to see her lover. Ashley nervously corrects the gatherings on her cornflower-colored dress. The girl had seen this outfit in the store a long time ago, and her mother went to meet her needs and bought it without paying for utilities. Ashley knew about all this, and when the purchase was made, she was nervous because she knew how sensitive they were to late payments. But she wasn't thinking about that now. She wanted to see Jason and to win him over with her appearance. For some reason, she was sure that would happen. Ashley was not fooled in her expectations. Slow music started playing and the DJ announced a white dance. A classmate approached the girl to ask her to dance. Ashley smilingly wanted to point out that the ladies were now choosing the suitors while agreeing, as she suddenly noticed Jason, who had just walked into the auditorium with a buddy. Ashley smiled at her classmate and bluntly refused the offer to dance. The girl fixed her blonde curls, headed toward Jason, walked up to the young man, smiled radiantly, and spoke amiably. "Perhaps tonight your highness will indulge us in a dance at the New Year's Eve ball." Jason looked at the girl, although he saw her at school every day, but on weekdays she seemed to him to be an ordinary schoolgirl who was not different from her peers. Basically, the guy just didn't pay attention to Ashley. But at that moment, she stood in front of him, as if she were a chic woman who had stepped off the cover of a fashion magazine. Jason looked at Ashley and couldn't understand how in one day she could transform herself so much. He couldn't help but voice his thoughts aloud. "You're like a fairy tale, from an ugly duckling to a beautiful swan. I can't believe I'm standing in front of Ashley, the same Ashley who's been bugging me for years with her crushes. Are you going to grumble or dance with me when the music stops?" he said with a smile. Ashley didn't say anything else, but simply stepped toward Jason. Soon the couple was dancing. Ashley couldn't believe that she was being embraced by the man she'd dreamed of for so many years, that he would notice her in some way. And Jason continued to marvel at how much his sister's friend had changed. The dance ended. Ashley hurried over to Emily, Jason tried to hold her back, but she just smiled back and headed toward her friend. Emily winked at her friend, but she waved back and sat down on a bench. The music in the room was energetic. Ashley watched the dancers and occasionally glanced at Jason, who was also watching her. At one point she looked at the guy again, but he was gone. She looked around confused as she suddenly heard the DJ's announcement. This beautiful tune one man dedicates to a beautiful girl named Ashley and asks her to dance. Before Ashley realized what was being said, Jason appeared in front of her and held out his hand. Jason offered to dance again, and soon the couple was dancing to a beautiful melody. They danced together more than once that night, and when the New Year's Eve ball was over, Jason volunteered to walk them home. The couple walked down the snowy road, holding hands. At first they were silent, unable to find the right words. But when they reached the girl's house, Jason suddenly turned Ashley toward him and said quietly, "Will you be my girlfriend?" Ashley laughed, then showed her boyfriend her tongue and hurried toward the house. Jason frowned. "I don't see what's so funny. I'm serious." After he said that, the girl stopped and then walked leisurely back toward Jason. Once next to him, she looked into his eyes and whispered, "Do you know how much I want to tell you right now? How long have I waited for you to notice me? I've endured your friends' taunts, your condescending attitude toward me, as if I were a juvenile who couldn't be taken seriously. And now you're just offering to be your girlfriend. How do I know tomorrow it won't be another joke to amuse my friends?" "Ashley, what are you talking about?" "Yeah, there was a time when I made fun of you, but this is serious. I really want you to be my girlfriend, and I promise that no one will hurt you now." Ashley smiled, waved, and headed home. Jason didn't stop her. Once inside, the girl was greeted by Mary's mother, who saw who was seeing her daughter off. Mary asked how the ball had gone, but all she heard in response was, "Fine." The woman came over and hugged her daughter gently, but Ashley suddenly snuggled into her shoulder and cried. Mary held her tighter against her, and when she calmed down a little, she said softly, "Jason's been paying attention to you. And you don't believe him? Or is there another reason you're crying?" For you, Jason was like conquering a summit. Ashley was going for it. And this is the finale. What's he got going for him? Mammoth, what are you saying? I really love Jason. What finale? Ashley shouted indignantly and broke free from her mother's embrace. It was at that moment that the mother realized that her daughter had actually fallen in love with the guy. The woman only softly mouthed in response, "That's how you know what the feeling is. Look, just don't lose your head." The next day, Jason met Ashley after school and then walked her home. And from that day on, the two began to see each other differently. They tried to meet at every spare moment to be together. A month later, Jason confessed his love for the girl. Time passed, and Jason graduated from high school, after which he was soon drafted into the army. Ashley knew perfectly well that the lover initially wants to serve, wait until he turns 18, and after that to sign. The girl was not against the decision of the chosen one. Especially the decision of the guy pleased Jason's parents and Ashley's mother, who wanted the young people not to hurry with a trip to the registry office. Jason served and returned home. He enrolled in college and Ashley was in the 11th grade. Young people continued to meet and dreamed that soon they would become a married couple, which soon happened. As soon as the girl graduated from high school and she turned 18, the couple legalized the relationship. Ashley enrolled in college at the commodity manager. The newlyweds moved in with Mary. The woman insisted on it. Life itself slowly flowed further. Initially graduated from the school Jason, who got a job immediately on specialty. Afterward, Ashley received a specialty. She, too, got a job. Now the young woman dreamed that they had a child. But several years passed, and she could not get pregnant. Ashley became anxious about it. She was examined, as well as her husband, and soon Ashley received the verdict that she and her husband had different Rh factors, and it would be difficult to conceive a child. The doctor also added, "In your case, getting pregnant under this circumstance will not be easy. I can add that the probability of conceiving a baby is equated to 20% out of 100. However, you can do IVF. That is my advice to you." Ashley was dumbfounded by the doctor's news, but she didn't lose hope and offered her husband to do the required procedure. The young woman piously believed that her spouse would agree to it. But Jason took the proposal of his wife in the bayonet. The man responded by saying everything should be like a normal married couple, without the intervention of any newfangled procedures. Ashley had a hard time with her spouse's answer, but she didn't want to contradict it. She still hoped that the doctors might have made a mistake. The young woman had even enrolled in medical school by correspondence. Ashley now wanted to become a midwife to figure out for herself why she could not get pregnant from her loved one. However, due to the fact that the lady could not conceive a child, scandals began to occur in the family. Jason, if initially veiledly accused his wife that she could not have children, then soon began to openly accuse the chosen one that she was empty. All the excuses of Ashley, who said that she could not get pregnant not only because of her fault, were reduced to zero. Jason blamed only his wife. Soon the man began to stay late at work. Ashley was worried, nervous. She did not want to lose her favorite person. However, family life imperceptibly shipwrecked, and one day Jason came home and began to pack his things. Ashley watched her husband in silence at first, and then she mumbled, "What are you doing?" "Can't you see? I'm leaving you. I have a woman. I'm sorry, she's expecting a baby. You have to realize we're not right for each other. It happens. I'm sorry. But we've only been together 4 years. Other couples have been together for decades and they don't have kids. And then a baby is born. Maybe you're right. But there's one thing. There's another woman expecting a baby from me, and she doesn't have to wait 10 years to get pregnant. Ashley and Jason should get a divorce, as each of them would be better off with a separate life. I'm sorry, but I have to explain to you the simple truth when you yourself understand everything perfectly well," the woman replied quietly, realizing that it was pointless to hold her husband back. He had made up his mind. Ashley looked sadly at her spouse after these words and left the house. She didn't want to see the man she loved packing his things to leave for good, which soon happened. A month passed after Jason left his wife. During that time, he came to Ashley's house only once to pick up the rest of his belongings and to tell her that he had filed for divorce. Ashley took it calmly, realizing that nothing could be changed. She only wished her ex-husband a happy farewell. Time passed. 3 years passed after the divorce. During this time, Ashley graduated from medical school, got a job in a hospital. Personal life of a young woman did not add up, although representatives of the stronger sex tried to look after her. However, Ashley was indifferent to the attention of men. Her mother was worried about this and repeatedly said, "Daughter, you can't do this. You do not think about your personal life. So many years have passed after the divorce, and you do not even want to accept the courtship of a decent man. I'm talking about Max, who lives across the street. He's been trying to get your attention for months. And you're not paying attention, Mom, you're not paying attention. Can we not start your favorite topic about my personal life?" Ashley said irritably and looked at her mother reproachfully. Mary shook her head sadly in response. A little over a month after her conversation with her mother, Ashley was coming home after work. She wondered if she really should accept her neighbor's advances. The woman went over the merits of her beau in her mind. Ashley was so engrossed in her thoughts that she didn't immediately hear the question. She looked at the brunette and said softly, "Yes, did you say something?" "I asked you where Takaya Street 63 was. You're going the wrong way. You need to turn left, and then a few houses later, another left." After that, Ashley was interrupted by a laughing stranger. "I've never been sent this far in my life. Why don't you have some time and draw me a route on a piece of paper?" "I'd rather walk you than draw it," Ashley said with a smile. "Can I really expect such a beautiful woman to be my guide? This is my lucky day, and I have good luck in all things," exclaimed the stranger cheerfully. Ashley didn't answer, turned the other way and walked away. The man followed her, telling her why he was in this town. From the story of the new acquaintance, who introduced himself as Alex, Ashley learned that he came here for construction, rented a place on an ad, and earned a little money. Ashley also learned that Alex was married when he was 30 years old, but the family life did not work out, and he and his wife separated by mutual consent. Hearing about the divorce, Ashley involuntarily remembered the breakup with her ex-husband. She thought that she had no relationship left with Jason after the divorce. The ex-spouse had simply packed up and disappeared from her life. The woman only heard news about him from his sister. Thinking about it, Ashley smiled sadly, which didn't escape her new acquaintance. "Why are you sad?" "I guess I'm not a good conversationalist," he said. "It's all right. We're almost there. Now you need to turn into the alley, and there you will find the right house. We are happy to help you. Let's say goodbye." "Wait, I'm not ready to let you go right away," Jason said. "Why don't you let me meet you? Or is there another way? I'll have fun now. And then you can take me to a better cafe where we can continue talking. I have to work today and I'm a little tired." "Yes, and you from the road need a break." "Whatever you say," Ashley said. "Let me give you my phone number and we'll call tomorrow and you can tell me where to go. One more thing. Why don't we go back to being on a first-name basis?" "Okay," she replied politely, then dictated her phone number and waved her hand to her new acquaintance. She turned around and hurried home. When Ashley got home, her mother came to her and anxiously asked why she was late after work. The woman hugged her mother affectionately and told her about the encounter. "Honey, what's wrong with you?" Mary exclaimed fearfully. "Were you sensible when you went with a stranger alone to see him off? What if this man was a criminal, and it was a planned operation to rob you, or even worse?" "Mom, don't panic," Ashley stopped her. "We live in the 21st century. First of all, I'm not beautiful enough to make a man want me at first sight. Second, I don't look like I have a lot of money. You can see it in my clothes. I don't wear brand name clothes. And third, Jason doesn't look like a gangster. I hope you're convinced by my arguments." Still, it was reckless. Mary sighed. "Promise me you won't do it again." "I will, Mommy," she said with a smile and hugged her mother. A few days later, Ashley met with Jason. The couple chose a small, cozy cafe to talk. The young people made an order, and then Jason asked her how things were going on the personal front. She laughed contagiously when she heard the question, and Jason was puzzled by it. "Your question about my personal life was inappropriate for the situation," Ashley explained. "If I had a boyfriend or was married, would I be sitting with you right now? Of course not. Let's just say that I was married at one time. But it didn't work out for the same reasons you are. We drifted apart. So I'm waiting for my prince to appear on the horizon. Could that be you?" "I don't know. It's too early to tell," Jason said. "It's only the second time we've seen each other. And we don't know each other. I want to tell you right away that I'm not going to get you into bed right now. Sex isn't the most important thing to me when I'm with a woman. Although I don't deny that it's important too." "That's honesty," Ashley said thoughtfully and turned the conversation to another direction. After that date, the couple began to call and see each other frequently. 2 months after meeting Jason, Ashley introduced him to her mother. Mary was charmed by her daughter's gallant suitor and informed Ashley about it. "I like Jason myself. I think I'm in love." "That's wonderful." Her daughter smiled. "Has he proposed yet?" "No, he just said that I was his one and only. But you know that men are ready for beautiful words just to get into bed. I'm more interested in actions, not sweet talk." "Then I'll talk to him about it," Mary decided. "But don't do that. I'm going to be 30 in a couple years. Do you want to organize my personal life for me?" Mary smiled at her daughter's words. She didn't say anything in response. However, the older woman took it upon herself to talk to Jason about it. When Jason came to visit again, the landlady offered to have a private conversation with her under a plausible pretext. Jason was surprised by Mary's request. Soon the older woman and the man were sitting in the kitchen while Ashley ran to the store at that moment. Mary had specifically asked her daughter to go get the hammer so she could be alone with Jason. And as soon as Ashley closed the door behind her, the lady of the house asked, "Man, are you going to live your life as a guest? I mean, do you intend to marry your daughter? Are you just going to take me on like that?" Jason replied, bewildered, not expecting a conversation on the subject. In the meantime, Mary asked tricky questions that were directed in one direction only when Jason would propose. Jason's answers were slurred. Then he rose abruptly from his chair and said firmly, I love your daughter, but can she and I decide when we should marry? I respect you, but I just didn't want to be told what to do and when to do it. Jason, I'm not interfering with your relationship. It's just that you're not seeing the basics. You don't see Ashley changing from the unknown. I get the impression that your daughter is beginning to doubt your feelings for her. Are you serious? Jason asked, puzzled. I couldn't be more serious. You talk to her about marriage, and then you'll understand, she said with a sad smile. A few days passed after that conversation. Mary was glowing in the kitchen. She knew that today her daughter should come with her boyfriend after work. The older woman cooked pilaf that day and pondered how much longer it would take Jason to propose. The landlady had set a table in the hall. She didn't like to huddle in the kitchen when guests came over. At the moment, Jason was still a guest to her, since he was not a groom. Mary put the plates on the table as she heard the front door open. The woman hurried into the hallway, where she saw her daughter entering with Jason. The man politely greeted the lady of the house and then handed a bouquet of scarlet roses with the words, "I have proposed to Ashley and she has agreed to be my other half. Now it's up to you. We want to hear you say your blessing." "Who else among us is taking the bait?" said the old woman with a grin in response. She winked conspiratorially at the man, which embarrassed him, for he remembered that he had recently addressed that word to the lady of the house. Meanwhile, Mary smiled cordially and said, "Of course I bless you. You young people have pleased me today. I hope that soon I will hear the guests shouting bitter." "You won't hear that, because we will quietly sign without any celebration. We're not 18 years old enough to have a big party," Ashley said quietly, glancing at the groom as if to suggest that he agree with her. Jason did. Soon the marriage took place. Jason came to live with his wife. Ashley was happy that she had found her happiness as a woman because she truly loved Jason. Her husband reciprocated. Mary, looking at the newlyweds, only wished them long happiness and health. Imperceptibly after the wedding, 2 years flew by. The couple occasionally had a few misunderstandings between them, but it concerned all everyday things, something Ashley didn't have time to do around the house or Jason. And at such times the couple expressed their discontent with each other. But such spats were settled the same day, and the couple went to bed reconciled. Ashley was satisfied with everything in her life except one thing: she couldn't get pregnant. Every day she called herself an outcast more and more often. One day, coming home after her shift, she walked into her bedroom, threw herself on the bed, and burst into bitter tears. Her mother came to the crying and sat down next to her daughter. The elderly woman guessed the cause of her tears. She stroked her daughter's head affectionately and said quietly, "Why are you getting upset? Don't cry, my girl. Apparently it's not yet your time to be a mom." "What are you talking about? What time is it?" "I'm already 30. Soon I won't even know what pregnancy is. I know labor is when a baby is born. But what if my husband comes a year from now and tells me he has a woman expecting a child with him? I've been there before. What do you say to that, Mom?" "First of all, calm down. Don't think about your ex-husband. He probably didn't love you enough to look outside of you. And as for Jason, he's not that kind of man. Jason loves you. I can see the way he looks at you and would do anything to make you happy with him. If he's willing to do anything, why not get checked out by the doctors? I've told him that more than once, and Jason just looks at me with sadness," Ashley tearfully told her mother. "He looks that way because it's impossible to talk to you about this topic. Jason actually wants to get a checkup. There's nothing wrong with his health. But he's not talking about it for one reason only. Jason's worried that you're stressing yourself out about not being pregnant. That's your reason. Think about it. Why is your husband keeping quiet about the checkup?" Ashley stopped crying after her mother's words and thought for a moment. She was silent for a while, thinking about what she had heard, and then she turned to her mother, suddenly buried her face in her chest and said quietly, "You can't imagine how bitter I feel now. I thought I was suffering alone. But it turns out that you are also worried about me. And also, Mom, it's getting harder for me to go to work every day. Let's take today's case, for example. We had a young girl admitted a few days ago. She just turned 18. She gave birth to a boy today. And now she's giving up her son because her boyfriend doesn't want children. You know how jealous I am. You can't even imagine. She's lucky enough to be a mom. even in a situation where her boyfriend doesn't want kids. I'd have a baby if I were her. I'd give the guy my resignation. That's what I told her today, but she told me to stay out of her personal life. Daughter, don't try that girl's situation on yourself. You have your life, she has hers. Now try to just calm down or Jason will come over and worry about you. Okay, thanks for the support. I needed it, her daughter said quietly. Life slowly moved on. It had been 3 years since Ashley's wedding. The woman no longer hoped that she would ever become a mother, but she still had that hope in her heart. However, Ashley did not say it out loud. On the contrary, she told her husband more and more often that their family was incomplete. These statements only caused Jason more heartache, for he knew how much she dreamed of having children. When the conversation about the family being incomplete, Jason couldn't stand it and angrily asked his wife to shut up. Ashley, hearing her husband's tone, was frightened, because in such a way her husband had never allowed her to talk to him like that. When Ashley's first shock passed, the woman said, "All this is because I can't give you an heir. Stop it, please. That's not what I'm tired of. It's that you're making an issue out of the wrong place. I understand that you dream of having a child, as every woman does, but why do you keep talking about it? We've only been living for 3 years, which means we have to wait a while longer." Before the husband could finish his sentence, he was angrily interrupted by his wife. "Shut up. My first husband said the same thing to me." And what happened in the end? He found a woman who bore him a son. He didn't cheat while he was still married, all because I couldn't get pregnant. And that was the only reason I went to medical school, to become a midwife back in the day. To find out the real reason why I couldn't have children. Wait, but you told me that your divorce was because, as they say, you didn't get along. I lied. And now you know the truth and you can roll. I'm not holding you, Ashley yelled hysterically. She was about to throw their family picture at her husband as her mother Mary entered the room. Mary gave her daughter a stern look and then quietly asked Jason to leave. The man didn't object and complied with his mother-in-law's request. Once the older woman was alone with her daughter, she sat up to Ashley and spoke softly. "Aren't you ashamed of throwing a tantrum here? I understand that you're nervous, but what does this have to do with your husband? You're torturing yourself and him. Do you want that? Enjoy your life. You love each other, and you'll still have a daughter, take my word for it." "But when, Mom?" "I said she will, so she will. We just have to be patient." I've heard those words many times before. How long do I have to wait? The gynecologist told me that everything is fine with my husband's health too. But I'm still not getting pregnant after saying that. Ashley abruptly got up from the couch and ran out of the room. Immediately she ran into her husband Jason, who was looking at her with a sad look. The woman walked briskly toward the exit. Jason wanted to follow, but his mother-in-law stopped him, saying, "Don't follow Ashley. Let her get some fresh air, let her calm down. And in a motherly way, I suggest you go to church with your wife and pray. Ashley's already been there. I suggest you both go. Trust me, Jason, it won't cost you anything." "Okay, Mary," Jason replied. Some time passed. Ashley was at work in a pensive mood. The woman's thoughts were preoccupied with the fact that her menstrual cycle had gone astray. Ashley's pensive mood was noticed by the doctor on duty and asked what was going on with her. Ashley was embarrassed by the question but still told what was bothering her. The medical officer laughed upon hearing the answer and said reproachfully, "I marvel at you, woman. Take you at least, Ashley. Where do you work?" "In a maternity hospital. A midwife." "Exactly. When symptoms like these arise, where should a woman go? And given that you're also a medical professional, what are your thoughts?" "Okay. You don't have to answer that. I can see by the look on your face that the answers to the questions have occurred to you. Let's go. I'd better check you out." After a while, Ashley came out in a happy mood. The doctor informed her that she was pregnant. Upon learning the wonderful news, Ashley immediately called her spouse and then her mother. Soon she was registered at the antenatal clinic. The woman spent the first trimester in the hospital. Then the pregnancy developed without complications. And soon Ashley gave birth to a baby girl at term. The newly married parents named their daughter Amber. The couple was in the seventh heaven of happiness that they had a child. Rejoiced at this event and Ashley's mother. The woman immediately noticed that after the birth of her daughter, as if blossomed. This was noticed not only by Mary but also by neighbors, who at every opportunity said to the elderly woman how Ashley has become more beautiful after the birth of her daughter. She's glowing from the inside out with happiness. "We're so happy for you." "Thank you," Mary replied, and immediately recited the Lord's Prayer to herself. The old woman was afraid that with such words people might inadvertently jinx her daughter's happiness. Meanwhile, Ashley was enjoying her new role as a mom. She enjoyed fussing with her baby, singing songs, putting on her baby's cradles, feeding her baby formula from a bottle. Ashley did her best to take care of her daughter, which sometimes frustrated her mother. Mary also wanted to nurse her granddaughter, so she would occasionally say to her daughter with a sad smile, "You're like a hen. You don't let anyone near you. And I am not a stranger to the baby. I want to babysit the baby too." "Oh, Mom, Amber is my little angel. And I'm just afraid to part with her even for 5 minutes," Ashley replied. Time passed and the girl turned 3. Mary started talking about putting Amber in kindergarten. Ashley immediately flatly refused the offer, which caused her mother's bewilderment. The old woman looked at her daughter with incomprehension and said that the child needed to start contact with her peers. Ashley, hearing her mother's words, replied that she would go with her daughter to the playground where the kids were walking. Mary did not insist any further, realizing that Ashley would not be persuaded. After that conversation, a couple months flew by. Ashley walked with Amber in the public garden. The woman watched her daughter digging in the sand with her peers. Suddenly, Amber grabbed a child's shovel and knocked the girl on the head with it. The little girl cried and ran to her mother. Ashley felt bad about her daughter's behavior and approached Amber to reprimand her. Frowning her eyebrows, the mother said, "Girls." Ashley was outraged at her daughter Amber's behavior in the sandbox. She took the trowel from her and gave it to another girl, apologizing. Ashley then said the walk was over, which displeased Amber. At home, Ashley told her husband Ben what had happened. Mary, Ashley's mother, upon hearing the story, stated this is still the flowers. The berries will come later. What you don't realize, Ashley, is that your daughter lives a reclusive life and thinks everything should be done just for her. You lack discipline, and as a mother, you're indulging your child in everything. Can't you see that the girl is turning into a little selfish girl? What are you talking about, Mom? Amber is a wonderful girl. You're just looking for faults in her that aren't really there, Ashley replied. Mary turned reproachfully to her son-in-law, Ben. Why don't you say something? Amber is your daughter, too. Don't you notice anything strange about her behavior? Ben grumbled and hurried away so as not to continue the conversation. In the evening, Ashley put her daughter to bed and then joined her husband in the bedroom. Maybe Mom is right about Amber growing up selfish. After all, sometimes she doesn't ask, she demands to buy this or that toy, she said thoughtfully. I don't know what to answer. Maybe our daughter needs a little brother or sister, Ben suggested. Well, let's do that now, he said with a smile as he hugged his wife. Honey, I'm serious. Maybe we really should listen to Mom and put Amber in daycare, Ashley replied. You know, I agree with that. Mary is retiring soon. Her allowance will be small. Our family budget is going to become quite paltry, and we need to repair the roof, its finances. If you get a job, we'll have extra income, Ben reasoned. A couple weeks later, Amber was enrolled in kindergarten, and Ashley went straight to work. At first, Amber was cranky and refused to go to daycare, complaining about her stomach or her leg. Lily believed it at first, but then realized that her daughter was being sly to avoid going to daycare. Ashley had a hard time convincing Amber to attend. When Amber stopped being cranky, other problems began. Caregivers complained about her behavior, saying she was acting arrogant and hurting other children. Ashley gave her daughter educational talks, but the complaints continued. Once again, when Ashley came to pick up Amber, the kindergarten teacher said Amber is an insufferable child. She doesn't get enough belt training. What did you say? With a belt? Are you out of your mind? You have a teacher's education. Ashley was outraged. How can you even mention the belt? I'm doing preventive counseling with my daughter at home. But you, too, should be helping me so that the girl adapts to her peers. Talk to the child and tell her that what she's doing is wrong. And if you and I do not find a common language, then I will have to appeal to your management. After this conversation between Ashley and the teacher, the complaint stopped, and after a while Amber was eager to go to kindergarten. Life slowly moved on. Ashley now dreamed of having a second child. She wanted to give her husband an heir. However, time passed, and the woman could not get pregnant. One evening, Ashley talked to her mother and said that she dreamed of having a second child. Mary sighed sadly after her daughter's words and sadly said, "I'll let you in on a secret. Basically, Amber is your only child, and there won't be any others." Why is that? It's because we're on our third generation of having only one child, and it's necessarily a girl. That was my grandmother's, then my mom's, and then mine. I wanted to have at least 3 too, but God gave me only you. It's an ancient prejudice. You could say it's a coincidence, though. Don't take hope away from me. I'm bound to have more. I'm sorry, daughter, I probably shouldn't have told you that. I don't want to take away your dream. I just thought you should know about it. The older woman sighed heavily and actually regretted her words. Time moved on imperceptibly, and it was about to be her 6th birthday when suddenly Mary felt sick. The woman was washing dishes in the kitchen when she felt a severe headache. The pensioner, writhing from the spasm, hurried to the kitchen cabinet, which stored medicines. However, the woman did not have time to get a pill, as she lost consciousness. Ashley discovered Mary when she returned from daycare with her daughter. The woman, seeing her mother lying on the floor, cried out desperately and rushed to her mom. Amber, hearing her mom scream, cried frightened. Meanwhile, Ashley tried to bring the pensioner to her senses, but she was unsuccessful, and then she called an ambulance. Soon Mary was hospitalized. Ashley waited for the hospital with visits. She wanted to know what was wrong with her mother. When the woman went to the doctor once again, the doctor quietly said the cancer is brain cancer. I can't say anything else, as I am not a specialist in this case. I have other specifics. You need to get to a specialized clinic as soon as possible. How so? Whispered the woman, who couldn't believe what the medical professional had just told her. That same evening, Ashley told her spouse about everything. The couple began to consider where they could find a decent amount of money to travel to the regional city. Ben suggested taking out a loan, but his wife didn't refuse. Soon Mary was taken to the regional city by her daughter. The elderly woman lay for a while in the hospital, and then Ashley came for her, who hoped that everything was not so terrible. However, the doctor's words shocked her. Stage 4. So what's wrong with that? It's not like it's a verdict. People live at this stage. You told me you're a medical professional. It's not for me to tell you what stage 4 is. Yes, people live at that stage, but the only question is how long they live. There's one thing I don't understand about your situation. How could you, a medical professional, allow your mother to have such a neglected disease? Mom rarely complained of headaches, and if she did say she had a headache, she added that it was the magnetic storms. They affect her that way, Ashley replied, hiding her face in her palms and crying desperately. The doctor put his arm around the visitor and said, "I understand your condition, but you should pull yourself together now, as you need to go to your mom. And I don't think Mary will be happy when she sees her daughter crying. Wait, shouldn't we go to the capital?" The man in the white coat looked sadly at the lady, then shrugged his shoulders. And then the doctor went to the table, where there was a decanter, and poured water into a glass. And only after a few moments the visitor uttered, "Hope dies last." It's a folk saying. If it makes you feel better, go to Washington. They have better equipment there. But I'm not sure they'll give you a cure that'll get your mom back on her feet in no time. If I were you, personally, I would spend the money not to buy expensive drugs that won't help, but to make my mom's last days happy. Knew what she wanted, and would fight to fulfill mom's dream. And if mom asks to prolong her life, then how would you fulfill your mom's wish? Ashley asked in a low voice and looked at the doctor point blank. The man hummed uncertainly, and after a few seconds he said, "I'd buy regular vitamins at the drugstore and give them to my mom. But at the same time I would tell her that these vitamins prolong life. But you would not fulfill your mother's wishes, but only make an appearance. Sometimes the appearance is life-extending." Soon the lady picked up her mother from the hospital and came home with her. The woman told her husband about the conversation with the doctor, as well as the desire to go to Washington, to which the spouse replied, "Don't you think the doctor was right when he said that the capital is unlikely to help anymore? You watch TV and see when celebrities are diagnosed with cancer, and public people spend fabulous money. And what's the result? Are you saying we should just give up and watch Mom go quietly to the grave?" I'm not saying that. Don't twist my words. I'm just trying to make the point that Mary should be at home, not in a hospital room. I don't know how much longer my mother-in-law has left to live, but I'd like her to feel peaceful and uncomfortable. All right, so be it. Mary lived only 2 months after her hospitalization. It happened early one morning when the sun was just coming out. The daughter, who had been sleeping with her mother lately, found out that the person she loved was no longer in the world. At first, Ashley felt guilty for not realizing in time when her mother complained of headaches. Ben tried to reason with his wife to stop tormenting herself. However, after such support, the woman went into a screaming fit. And when once again Ashley blamed herself for not looking after her mother, the head of the family said, "You're getting paranoid. Stop being hysterical and let it go. Don't you realize you're becoming toxic? It's all because of your speculation. You're not just hurting yourself, you're hurting me and my daughter. You don't understand anything. I'm a medical professional, and I should have responded to Mom's complaints. And I didn't. And as a result, Mom is no longer alive. It's my fault she passed away so early. Oh, honey, you're really getting on my nerves. Why don't you stop beating yourself up? I think you should take a vacation with your daughter right before Amber starts first grade. Get some rest and relaxation. I'd go with you, but I don't have vacation until October. What do you think of my offer?" asked the husband and hugged his wife, who was still sobbing. The woman only nodded in response. She no longer had the strength to argue with her husband. Soon Ashley and her daughter left on a trip to the Gulf Coast. The woman was glad that Ben had insisted on the trip. Ashley spent a week at the sea with her daughter, and now it was the last day. Before leaving, Amber asked her mom to go to the beach one last time to admire the sea. Ashley did not refuse the child, and soon mother and daughter were already walking barefoot on the soft golden sand. Every now and then the girl ran to the water to touch the water with her toe. Ashley was watching her daughter when someone called her name. The woman looked back in bewilderment and saw her ex-husband Jason walking toward her. Ashley stared at him in amazement. Jason approached the woman and said hello in a friendly manner before mouthing, "Taking a vacation. I heard from my sister that you have a daughter. Congratulations, you've been dreaming of having kids." "Thank you. So many years have not seen each other, although we live in the same city. But we met at the sea. Listen, let's go sit in a cafe and talk. You and I have a lot to remember. You haven't changed a bit since the baby was born. You're just as petite as before. I'd love to reminisce with you about our pranks in bed. Thank you for the invitation, but I must refuse you. My daughter and I are leaving today, and you'd be better off with your wife, because I have a man I love, and I'm not attracted to the side, unlike you," Ashley replied softly, disgusted by her ex-husband's tone about intimacy. Meanwhile, Jason frowned and said wistfully, "We're not making love to my wife right now. She's 2 months away from giving birth, and she's blown to smithereens. I told my husband to terminate the pregnancy. After all, there are already 2 children, and she said that she will give birth to a 3rd. So it's wonderful that you have so many children. Children are happiness. But I just don't understand why you walk on the beach without your soulmate and children. My wife's at home, and I'm here on business, like on a business trip. My father-in-law is a businessman, so he sent me down here for a couple days. Well, good luck with your business. We should get going with our daughter," Ashley said quietly and beckoned her daughter over to her. The woman took the girl's hand and they headed towards the exit of the beach. Ashley walked at that moment and thought how lucky Jason's wife was to already have 2 children and to be carrying a baby under her heart at this time. Soon Ashley and her daughter arrived home. They were gushing over Ben about what a wonderful time they had. Amber took a handful of sand out of her backpack to make her daddy happy. Ashley laughed when she saw it. Her husband looked at his wife in bewilderment, but she was even more amused when she saw Ben's amazed face. When the first emotions from the sand had passed, Ashley explained the reason for her laughter. She told her husband that she had hidden something in her backpack the night before she left. Ashley hadn't thought much of it at the time, but as she put her daughter's backpack on her shoulders, she wondered why it was so heavy. Ben, still not realizing anything, looked into his daughter's backpack and immediately chuckled, and through a fit of laughter turned to his daughter. "You wanted so much to please Daddy that you stuffed the whole backpack with sand. That's a good girl to please your father. So you were sunbathing in the sun like me and Mom. And now you can fill a trough with water, pour sand on the ground next to it. And it's like you're having a vacation at the sea. It's great, isn't it? You're so good at it." "That's a wonderful idea. And Jackson Sunshine, Daddy will give you a kiss for being clever." Life moved on, and soon it was time to go to first grade. On the eve of that event, Ashley put her daughter to bed and headed into the hall to iron her white apron. She spread the bedspread on the board, and then laid the apron down thoughtfully and spoke softly. "How quickly time runs. You too. Our daughter is going to first grade tomorrow. As my mother used to tell me, it's worth it for a child to go to school. Then time will fly by after that imperceptibly." "Is that you talking to yourself?" pronounced Ben, who had just entered the room and heard his spouse's phrase. "I'm saying that you and I are getting a little old now. And you know, my mom was right when she said that all women in our line give birth to only one child. And it's always a girl. Oh, that's so lucky. You and me were in the prime of our lives. And as for the one-child thing, that's just prejudice. That's what I told my mother. But you see, I can't get pregnant again." "That's all right. We still have a whole cartload of time. Drop what you're doing and let's go into the bedroom to make a baby," Ben said, and winked excitedly at his spouse. Ashley smiled and said, "I was having a serious conversation with you." "And you're at it again?" "I'm being quite serious, too. And about the kids, I can only say this: we have a daughter. And we should be happy about it. We need to get Amber on her feet so she can go to school and get a good life in the future." And so Amber has already started first grade. Her mother and father alternately took her daughter to and picked her up from school. The girl studied willingly, and soon parents often heard praise from the class teacher. Ashley and her husband were only happy. The first half of the year flew by. Amber became friends with a classmate. The girl's name was Christina. Friends spent a lot of time together. The parents of the girls were only happy about this friendship, which did not affect the performance at school. And now it was spring. The time of summer vacation was approaching. Amber came home alone. She had already been released to school alone after the winter. The girl came home and went to her room without greeting her mother, who was busy in the kitchen. Ashley was curious as to why her daughter had done that. The woman wiped her hands on a towel and proceeded to the nursery, where she saw her upset daughter. The homeowner approached the girl and asked what had happened. Amber glanced glumly at her mom and immediately, almost tearfully, said, "Christina, her parents bought her rollerblades, as well as a helmet, elbow pads, and knee pads. I want to go rollerblading in the summer too." "And what are you getting upset about? Daddy will come over and talk to him about it." "It's all words. Dad already promised me a bicycle." "And what? He bought a junk bike. It's a shame to even ride it in the yard. Dad bought me the bike I pointed out in the store, and then suddenly I needed another one. He said, 'Ride this one first, and then you can get another bike.' I don't need a bike now. I want rollerblades." In the evening, Ben came home from work, as his daughter immediately ran up to him and asked him to buy rollers. The head of the family, after a little thought, promised his daughter to make the purchase. Ashley heard the answer. The spouse did not interfere in the conversation between father and daughter. However, when Amber went to bed, Ashley emphatically stated that she was against the purchase. Ben looked at his wife in amazement and asked, "Why do you disapprove of rollerblading?" "She's too young for the sport. Amber is a girl, not a boy. It's more appropriate for her to play with her dolls, not run around on those rollerblades like tomboys everywhere." "Wait, honey, you know what kids are like these days. Girls only play dolls in kindergarten, and once they go to school, their priorities change. And anyway, how can you imagine our daughter's friend rollerblading and Amber looking at her with envy? It's a very interesting picture. And if Christina bought a live tiger tomorrow, would you run out and buy that animal for your daughter too? Why make it so complicated?" Okay, if you promised your daughter, then buy the rollers. But I warn you right away that you will walk with Zlata when she starts to learn to ride them. Whatever you say, my queen. Ashley ahed when she heard the sum. However, the woman glanced at her daughter, who was looking at the roller skates with wild delight. Afterward, Ashley smiled at her spouse and said, "Look at how happy our daughter is about these rollerblades. As they say, what's a little something for a child to be happy about? Okay, go outside and try out the accessories and then tell us about the progress." The time went on its own. At first, Ben accompanied his daughter and her friend on outings after work. And then, when Amber became more confident on rollers, the family decided that the girl would ride only in the park and never on the roadway. Amber happily agreed to this proposal, as she was already tired of her dad accompanying her. And Christina's father does not do it. June and then July flew by. Ashley was coming home from her shift. She rode on the shuttle bus and smiled as she recalled her day at work. Soon the driver announced a stop. The woman got out of the vehicle and headed to the nearest store to buy milk and eggs. Ashley was going to make an omelet for dinner. The woman had already approached the store when she heard her spouse calling her. Ashley turned around and asked what he was doing here. Ben smiled and pronounced, "I wanted to meet you from work, but I guess I didn't time it right." "There's something you're not telling me, honey. Spill what happened," the woman mumbled worriedly. Ben, seeing his wife's reaction, laughed and immediately said, "It's actually our boss's anniversary. He let everyone go home early, but I wasted my time and cooked dinner at home myself. And then I saw that there was no bread at home and hurried to the store, where I saw you. And I thought something had happened to my daughter," Ashley said, relieved. Then she smiled and said, "Let your boss have a holiday every day then. I'll be spared the cooking then." Imagine how happy that would be for a woman. By the way, I forgot to ask, what did you cook? "Flotsam pasta is my specialty. You know very well that cooking is not my business. That's what I have you for. Now you tell me how your day at work went." Ashley looked lovingly at her husband. Then she told him that she'd had a hard day at work. He asked why it had been tiring at work. Ashley smiled and said, "Although it's a hard day, it's a joyful one. A woman gave birth to triplets today. Imagine. She's 38 years old and this is her first labor. You should have seen this woman in labor when she was given her first baby in her arms. That woman's eyes were full of happiness. That's the first time I've seen eyes like that in so many years. And the funniest thing is that when she was transferred from the labor room to the ward, she began to wonder how she would feed 3 babies because she had only 2 breasts. Our medical staff, everyone who was in the ward, just fell down laughing. They found something to laugh about. If I were a woman, I might be interested in that question too. Although, I admire our woman in labor because she gave birth at 38. And you've given up on the whole thing. We should do the same thing tonight, as soon as we put our daughter to bed. And maybe don't even hint to me that you had a hard day's work or a headache. You won't get away from me today," he said with a smile. "Let's go home then. Can't wait to taste your specialty," said the wife with a laugh and took her husband under her elbow. And so it was already the end of August. School was a few days away. Amber walked up to her mom and asked to go for a walk. Ashley had the day off today. She glanced out the window and then turned to her daughter. "It's okay to walk, but just no rollerblades." Amber frowned and immediately inquired, "Why no rollerblades?" "The weather's turning bad. It's supposed to rain. Maybe you and Christina can sit with us today and play on the laptop," Mom replied. So much for Mom's idea. There were only a few days left until school started, and then there would definitely be no time to go for a ride. "Mom, let me go. Christina and I will skate carefully, as always." "Mom, you're the best in the world. My favorite. You know I can't refuse you when you ask me to. Go on, take a walk," said the woman and kissed her daughter on the top of her head. As soon as the girl jumped out of the door, the woman felt a vague uneasiness in her soul. Ashley was about to run out after her daughter and call her home when her cell phone rang. The woman was distracted by the phone call and then went out into the yard. But her daughter was not there, of course. It had been about 2 hours since Amber had gone for a walk. Ashley still felt a heaviness in her soul. The woman dialed her daughter and asked how they were doing. Amber cheerfully replied that everything was fine and immediately disconnected the connection. Hearing her daughter's voice made Ashley feel a little calmer. Another hour passed before Amber left for her walk. Ashley started the laundry. She pulled out her daughter's terrycloth robe as there was a loud knock on the door. At the same time, the woman heard Christina crying. Ashley hurried to the door, and as soon as she opened it, she saw Christina's crying face. The landlady asked anxiously, "What happened?" "Amber was hit by a car," she said through her sobs. "I came straight to you." "What do you mean, hit by a car? What are you talking about? Where's Amber?" "They took her away in an ambulance," Christina said through sobs. Ashley sucked in air with her mouth and then asked the girl where it had happened. When she found out where the hit and run had happened, the woman rushed to the scene of the tragedy without changing her slippers. When she got there, she saw a small crowd of gawkers, as well as a cordon of the place on the stretch of road. The woman, pushing people, rushed to the place. As soon as she got there, she saw the chalked silhouette of a child on the pavement, as well as brown bloodstains. Not far away, Ashley spotted a helmet. The helmet belonged to her daughter, and at the same moment the woman lost consciousness. Ashley woke up in the hospital. Sitting next to her was her husband Ben, who was holding her hand. As soon as Ben saw that his wife came to her senses, he immediately jumped up and ran out into the hallway, where he loudly called a nurse. A girl in a white coat hurried into the room. She approached Ashley and asked how the woman was feeling. Ashley waved her hand and wanted to get up. Her husband wouldn't let her. Then the woman asked her spouse, "What about your daughter?" "She's alive. Amber's in the ICU. The doctors are fighting for her life. Help me up. I need to be near my daughter. My presence will help her." "You just had a heart attack, and you can't get up," Ben said quietly but firmly. He wanted to add something else, but at that moment the doctor entered the room and came up to Ashley and said, "Are you awake? That's great. You're going to be given an injection, and then try to sleep. I'm not going to be here. Let's get you the papers you need to sign to refuse hospitalization." "Ashley, do I really need to tell you as a medical professional what the consequences of refusing medical care are?" The man in the white coat said sternly. "That's exactly what I know. That is why you should not waste your precious time now and explain to me the plain truths which I already know without you." The doctor looked at Ben after the woman's words, but he only waved his hands, thus making it clear that he could not influence his spouse in this situation. And after a while, Ashley was near the entrance to the intensive care unit. She prayed to God that her daughter would survive. Ben at this time stood near the window and looked at the sill with a hateful look. Some time passed. Ashley walked over to her husband and quietly touched his elbow. The husband immediately flinched at the touch and turned to his wife. He put his arm around Ashley and then pressed the woman's head against his chest and immediately felt her crying. Ben asked her to calm down, but the woman didn't respond to her husband's words. Ben became nervous. He was worried that his wife might have a second stroke. The man wanted to run after the nurse as he was stopped by his spouse, who faintly said, "Tell me what happened." "I can't tell you much." Anyway, the girls were already rollerblading home. They needed to pass the zebra. As here Christina had a slip on her lap, she bent down to correct it, and her daughter at the same time moved across the road, and then a foreign car flew out. Amber didn't have time to react and a hit and run occurred. Christina was saved from the collision by her knee pads. Witnesses called an ambulance and police officers. The investigator told me the driver fled the scene. But he's already been arrested. He was under the influence of alcohol when he hit our daughter. Ben was silent, looked at his wife, who only clenched her hands in a fist. The woman's face had gone pale. Ashley didn't say anything, she just stood there staring at one point. The man did not know how to behave in this situation, so once again pressed his wife to him and gently said, "Everything will work out, and our daughter will still recover." "I want that bastard to get the maximum punishment," Ashley told him. "That criminal will get what he deserves. Right now, I think you should go home so you can recover." "No home, our little girl needs us here." "Okay, sweetheart." It was another couple hours before two doctors came out of the ICU. Ashley rushed over to them and grabbed one doctor by the chest. The man in the white coat tried to pull his hands off the woman, but he was unsuccessful. And then the second doctor turned to the lady's husband. "We did everything we could here, but the girl suffered many injuries. We couldn't save her." Ashley, as soon as she heard this, pushed the doctor away, then sobbed loudly. She then turned to her husband and started beating her fists on his chest, shouting, "It's your fault. It's your fault. I was against these videos. How am I supposed to live without my little girl?" One of the doctors quickly realized that the woman was hysterical. The man in the white coat shouted something to the nurse, who came out to the noise. The lady was given an injection and soon she fell asleep. Ben was next to his wife the whole time. And as soon as the spouse woke up, she asked to take her home. The man complied with the request without any objection. Amber's funeral soon followed. All this time Ashley was in prostration. She did not understand why so many people had come to the cemetery, and also did not realize why those present were expressing their condolences to her. It wasn't until the coffin was being lowered into the hole that Ashley realized it was her baby girl being buried. The woman shrieked, ran to the coffin, wrapped both arms around it, and screamed, "Don't. I can't let my daughter go to her final resting place alone. I want to lie next to her." From the coffin, Ashley was able to tear Ben together with her father, who came to the funeral of his granddaughter. The woman was then picked up by neighbors and hurriedly taken away from the cemetery. At home, Ashley could not sit down at the table to memorialize her daughter as she became ill with heart trouble. Her spouse called an ambulance and the woman was hospitalized. Several days passed after the funeral. Ben visited his spouse daily, although it was a long drive. "We still don't know when the trial will be. Be patient, my dear, let's get better at my place," he told her. "Why should I get better if our daughter is no longer in this world?" Ashley replied, "I realize that we lost our only child, but don't forget that I need you, that I love you, and I can't lose you. And Amber wouldn't want that either." Some time passed. Ashley was released from the hospital and went to work. The days seemed like torture for the woman. Ashley hated the nights most of all, as sleep was non-existent. She had fleeting visions of her daughter coming to her and asking her to punish the man who hit her. Ben saw that his wife could not find peace until she knew what punishment the driver would receive, and soon the trial took place. As it turned out, that driver was some local oligarch. The defendant got off with a fine. It was twisted to mean that Amber was crossing the road in the wrong place. Amber's testimony disappeared from the case, and a whole new set of witnesses came forward. When Ashley found out about it, she went door to door with the D.A.'s office, the police, the DMV. But everywhere she was pointed at the door. The woman was desperate, and after another visit to the investigator, she came home and drank a few shots of whitewater. Ashley literally immediately became tipsy, as strong drinks were not spoiled. When her husband came home from work, her wife said to him in an inebriated voice, "How can you live peacefully in this world when our daughter is gone because of your fault? First of all, you, my dove, are drunk. Let's talk about it tomorrow when you're sober. I want to tell you everything now. You're not really a man. The man who ruined my daughter is out there, and you didn't even lift a finger to avenge him. What can I do when money rules the world now? Don't you understand that? What do you think I should do? Go to that oligarch and throw him from the 5th floor. Would that make you feel better? Only I'd have to go to jail for it, because I don't have the money to pay him off. I'd go and throw him from the 5th floor. Maybe then my daughter would stop coming to me at night." Ben did not say anything to his wife, only took the bottle of hot drink from her hands. And afterward, the man retired to the nursery to ponder how to help his wife overcome the loss of her only daughter. Sasha did not sleep all night, and the only thing that came to his mind was to take his wife to the bishop in the church, which he soon did. After the church visit, the lady was now less often visited by her daughter in dreams. Time moved on imperceptibly, and now a year has passed since Amber was buried. During this time, the lady had hardened a bit. Whereas she used to come to work in high spirits, now she disliked women in labor. The woman did not tell anyone about it, but the team has already noticed that Ashley often rudely treats future moms. The chief doctor Jackson Michael repeatedly made his subordinate remarks on this matter. The woman promised to correct herself, but everything was repeated again. And once Ashley, together with the doctor, delivered a woman in labor. The young woman was in labor for the first time. And when the contractions began, she screamed that she was in pain. Ashley considered the future mommy hysterical, and the words of the doctor made remarks to her, and after the birth wrote a report to the chief doctor. Jackson Michael familiarized himself with the document and called Ashley to his office. As soon as the woman entered, the master of the office seriously said, "This can't go on any longer. If before, everyone wanted you to assist in childbirth, but now women in labor, just hearing your name, frightened. Maybe you should go to the sea with your husband, get away for a while. I understand your grief that you lost a child, but our patients are not to blame. Let's find some common ground, otherwise we'll go our separate ways, even though you're an excellent midwife. Now, I want an answer from you. I'm going to reconsider how I treat my patients. I'm sorry, it won't happen again." I've heard that before. Ashley, why don't you give me one last chance? Okay? You might want to think about taking a vacation. A change of scenery for a while is good for a person, especially in your situation. Ashley came home in a gloomy mood. She went into the kitchen to make dinner, but immediately changed her mind and went into the living room, where she turned on the TV. The woman didn't watch the program at all. She was thinking about how to continue going to work. Ashley was distracted from her thoughts by her husband, who sat down next to her and said affectionately, "How was your workday? A lot of women gave birth today? Why are you interested? Honey, what's the matter with you? Actually, I've always been interested in that. Then from now on, stop doing it. How I'm sick of everything. How I'm sick of everything," said the wife nervously. Ben frowned after his wife's words and then said firmly, "Tell me what happened at work." Ashley didn't talk herself into it twice, but honestly recounted the conversation with the head doctor. Ben was silent for a long time after his wife's narration, and then asked why she had developed a dislike for laboring women. Ashley thought for a moment, and then, looking her husband in the eye, confessed, "You know, I look at their happy faces when they're presented with a baby, and it's like I get an electric shock inside, and it's because they're moms, and I'm never going to get to experience that. It's moments like that when it's like I'm possessed. I can't help it. In that case, should you quit this job? You can't force yourself to do something you don't want to do. I get the impression that you've grown to hate being a midwife and find no outlet in this job." "What do you mean quit? Do you want me to sit in four walls and slowly go insane?" "I'm not suggesting you sit at home. You could get a job as a clerk in a small store. I think you'll be able to balance your debit and credit. Or maybe we should really go on vacation somewhere in the country, take a tent, fishing rods, and spend a week in solitude, and then think about changing jobs." "Okay, let's do that, honey." Soon the couple went on vacation to Ben's father's house in the country. The couple had a great time. They often went to nature, where they fished in the lake, and then together they picked berries. Ashley then confessed to her husband that it was a pity that they did not go on vacation when Amber was alive. The husband did not answer anything to his wife, as he realized that if he said a word, his wife would start crying. A week later, the couple went back. Ben, upon arrival, asked his wife if she could go out to work in the maternity ward. Ashley replied in agreement. The woman actually believed the trip had changed her internally, and soon Ashley was on shift. The first day was fine, but after a week the same feeling of resentment returned to her. Ashley tried to fight her envy. She even pinched her arm to keep from being rude. It had been about a month since the vacation. Ashley arrived at work and mentally wished to herself that there were as few women as possible wanting to be moms today. Ashley had no idea what a difficult shift she was about to have. And it had all started when Taylor Grievna, the doctor on duty, had her daughter's fever. The young woman asked, "Check to see if you can handle it on your own today, especially with 4 hours left in the shift. Just understand I am divorced from my husband, and there is no one to look after my daughter, and I'm worried about her. She's got a fever of 38.8. She called me the other day." Taylor Grievna, go with peace of mind. I've never delivered a baby on my own, have I? and there's someone to help you if you need it. The head doctor's on call today. By the way, did you ask him to leave? Otherwise he'll ask me and I won't answer, and I'll get in trouble. Yeah, I talked to him. He's a man of the world and he recognized my situation right away. He also said that if Ashley was working, there was nothing to worry about. That head doctor of ours is flattering me. All right, go ahead, Taylor Grivna. You'll be running an even higher fever by the time you get home to your daughter. Just as Ashley escorted the woman out, a nurse announced that there were 2 women in labor. Ashley sighed to herself and hurried into the exam room. There was one middle-aged woman in there who had been brought in by ambulance. Ashley began to ask the patient questions in a businesslike manner. Just then, the head doctor entered the room and addressed the midwife. This is going to be fun today. You're taking care of this woman, and I'm about to have a difficult labor. Ashley sighed sorrowfully and hurried to examine the woman. As soon as she saw the patient's chart, she immediately shuddered in displeasure. The woman in labor, Rachel Lionel, was 58 years old. After all the necessary procedures, the woman in labor was taken to the labor room. Ashley was clearly giving commands as to how the patient should proceed. Rachel Lionel responded by moaning and begging for the baby to be saved. Ashley was angry with the woman, unable to suppress her anger. And when the woman in labor moaned again, the midwife said angrily, "You're crazy. How could you think of giving birth at the age of 58? Now keep quiet and do as you're told." The labor was difficult. Ashley was completely exhausted. She would have been happy to have the help of the chief of medicine. But Jackson Michael was delivering triplets, and he was having a hard time with it too. And when the workday was over, Ashley breathed a sigh of relief. Now the only thing she wanted to do was come home, take a bath, and go to bed. This day she even changed her principles. She called a cab to get to her place of residence. Previously, she had not allowed herself such expenses. Soon the woman was already at home, where she was met by her husband Ben. He offered his wife to eat, but she waved away and said that she did not want anything, as the day was stressful. Afterward, Ashley said she delivered a baby for an elderly woman. Her husband whistled in surprise and said in amazement, "I can't believe what kind of women we have here." The next day at lunchtime, Ashley received a call from the chief physician, who ordered her to report to work. The woman was often called by her superiors, so she involuntarily had a thought, and whether this call is not connected with yesterday's elderly woman in labor. There was no time to ponder, however, and Ashley drove to the hospital. As soon as she got to the second floor, where the chief physician's office was, a nurse ran up to her and whispered, "Ours is out of control, vomiting and swearing." "What's the reason?" "You know, he said something about the woman in labor yesterday." The girl in the white coat wanted to add something, but then the door opened and the head doctor appeared and said, "I was just waiting for you, Ashley. Come on, let's go have a talk." The first to enter the office was the chief physician, who stood by the desk, tapping his fingers nervously on it. Ashley came in after the man, and she knew from the doctor's demeanor that he was going to get a scolding, since he was rarely this angry. As the woman closed the door, Jackson Michael came right up to her and said sternly, "What are you doing? I am well aware that today both you and I have a day off after yesterday's duty. But I get a call from a doctor saying that a woman in labor wants to get to know me. I wouldn't have responded to this request if I hadn't been told who this woman was. Do you happen to have any idea who this woman might be?" "I do," Ashley replied. "Rachel Lionel Kopylova gave birth to a baby girl." "That's right. When I went to see her, she was curious about the midwife who delivered her baby. Naturally, I asked what was wrong. Rachel wouldn't tell me what the situation was, but it was clear she wasn't happy about what you'd done. And now I'll tell you for your understanding that this woman in labor is the wife of a very famous man in the regional city. And if now we are tortured with checks, the stumbling block will be you, because your tongue says nasty things. I'd like to add that if I fire you, your husband will get it too, and so will I for that matter." "Wait a minute," Ashley said. "If this lady is the wife of a respectable man, why did she come here to give birth? Why didn't she give birth in her own town?" "You're asking me these questions?" The head doctor was indignant. "You don't understand the seriousness of the situation. I'm not interested in why Rachel ended up in our hospital." Ashley was more concerned with the aftermath of her shift. She wasn't going to rant about it. You go on your knees and beg for forgiveness, birthing girl. Basically do whatever it takes to earn her favor. The doctor gestured toward the door, letting her know that the conversation was over. Ashley walked out of the office. Her face was burning. The woman didn't know how to start a conversation with the woman in labor, whom she had insulted. Nevertheless, Ashley pulled herself together and headed toward the room. She knocked on the door and then entered. Immediately, her attention was caught by the way Rachel Lionel was admiring her newborn daughter. Ashley hesitated, letting her know she was in the room. She turned at the sound and looked at the midwife intently. "I want to apologize to you," Ashley spoke first. "I behaved inappropriately with you yesterday. I'll get down on my knees if you want me to. But please forgive me. I didn't know whose wife you were." "Don't clean it. Are you saying that if I were the wife of a locksmith or a janitor, you wouldn't feel guilty about talking to a woman in labor like that?" Rachel Lionel said sternly and looked reproachfully at the midwife. Ashley at that moment was ready to fall to the ground in shame, because she realized that she had said something stupid. But she answered nonetheless. "I wouldn't feel guilty." "Well, thank you for your honest answer. If you lied now, I'd lose the last shred of respect for you. Now tell me, why are you so rude to women in labor? Don't deny it, since I've been doing a little checking up on you around here." Ashley looked at Rachel with a sad look, and then tears ran down her cheeks. The midwife, without knowing why, told this woman how she had lost her baby, that the perpetrator had gotten off scot-free after the hit and run, and told her that she dreamed of becoming a mom, but it wasn't happening. Therefore, when women of advanced age give birth, she is filled with anger and envy. Rachel listened attentively to the interlocutor. Then she smiled sadly. She invited the midwife to sit down next to her, then took her hand and asked her to stop crying. Ashley wiped her tears away with the palm of her hand. While smearing mascara on her face, Rachel immediately held out a damp washcloth with the words, "Are you now, like a lost sheep, aware of our fate? Related. At one time, I couldn't get pregnant for a long time either. And when it did happen, it was a miracle for me and my husband. My husband at that time was still a small official in the administration. And then my son grew up and against parental will, after serving in the army, went to the hot spot. My husband and I hoped that the trouble would pass us by. However, the miracle did not happen. Our boy died. We could not recover from this tragedy for a long time. But as they say, time heals. My husband moved up the career ladder, and that's when I had the idea that I could still have a child. I was examined in many clinics, but the doctors were throwing up their hands. And then came the decision to do IVF. My husband and I consulted. He is 7 years younger than me, and we came to a mutual agreement that we could take a risk. And the risk justified our expectations. We have a daughter. The main thing is that our health should be good." Ashley sat in silence after Rachel's story. The woman's story had touched something in her soul. Meanwhile, Jackson Michael paced nervously around the office, wondering if Ashley had made amends, and unable to bear it, the man strode into the room, where he saw a peaceful conversation between the women, who smiled at each other. The chief physician came out in bewilderment. The only thing he realized was that the conflict was over. Meanwhile, Ashley smiled embarrassedly and asked the question she had been wondering about the late pregnancy. "It's understandable. I'm happy for you, but I just don't understand why you came to give birth in a provincial town." "I didn't really want to come here," Rachel answered Lionel. But immediately, becoming serious, she continued. "My husband went on a business trip to New York. I was against this trip, but my husband is still an enthusiast, likes to be in the know. My spouse was away for 2 days and should have been back by now. Then I got the call that he had a heart attack. I could not stay at home and drove myself by car to that city. However, the nervousness had taken its toll. I felt the baby wanted to be born, so your town came up. And in the morning my husband called and said that he is doing well and he will be here soon. I had to scold him and scare him that if he leaves the hospital without permission, our daughter will be taken away from the hospital. My blackmail succeeded. What a brave woman you are." Ashley said with admiration. "I'm not brave. I just love my husband as much as he loves me. And yet I envy you, but with white envy, I mean, you realized your dream and became a mom. Can you do it too? You're a midwife and you know what IVF is. I do, but I'm afraid my husband wouldn't like it, Ashley said quietly. And that's where you're wrong. From your story, your husband loves you and would do anything to make you happy. My advice is to go for it. Just don't hurt any more women in labor. I give you my word it won't happen again. Meeting you and your story changed something in my soul. And you know I'm very happy about it.
Archie, where are you looking again? His wife shouted at him. Sidey, just waving his hand at her, there were young girls on the road whom grandfather liked to look at. Oh, and you'll wait. She only sighed and went behind the stove. Stop talking and put the tea on, Archie grumbled. I'll put it on. But what are you doing? All my life with you. Maria couldn't stand the way her husband behaved. Sometimes she was ashamed, especially when she was young. She had to blush for him. Lie down. Maria heard him. She quickly lay down on the ground and covered her head with her hands. Immediately, there was an explosion. Clods of earth flew at her. It was impossible to lie down for long. It was necessary to move forward, and suddenly the wounded, they need her help. Alive. She crawled on the ground and turned over the Red Army soldiers. Some were just concussed, squinting, unable to open their eyes. Another was rolling over in the trench. Nurse. Suddenly there was a quiet cry. Yes, sweetie, I'm here. She crawled up to him. What have I got? His face and hands were covered in blood. Now, the doctor will take a look. Everything will be all right. She grabbed him by his jacket and dragged him along the ground. The soldier himself helped her with his legs. It was dangerous to get up. They crawled only 5 meters, and the girl was already exhausted, but she would never show it. She had to take the wounded man to the infirmary, which was located here on the battlefield. Maria lived with her parents. She had just finished school. Everything was good. It seemed that only a bright future lay ahead. What do you plan to do? Her mother asked her. I don't know, enrolled in a nursing course. The girl was smiling. Good. That will always come in handy in life, her father praised her. They were all sitting at the table together when the radio announced that war had broken out. How is it? The girl looked at her parents with frightened eyes. Which was to be expected, the man sighed. Everyone had been preparing for this for a long time. Yes, it was unexpected, but many were talking about war. There was nothing left to do. The man knew that soon he would receive a summons and would have to go to the front. Yes, how will we be here without you? My wife began to wail. Honey, don't cry. I think that not only me, when the summons comes, no man will stay at home. Everyone will go to defend their homeland, hugged her husband. And I'll go. Maria got up from the chair. Where are you going? You're not old enough yet, laughed her father. Why, everyone goes and I cannot. The girl realized that after the course, where she will learn how to provide first aid, she will definitely be useful to her country. Well, sit down for now. No one has not yet come and did not call you anywhere, her mother told her and patted her on the back. Maria went to her room. It was scary. It was one thing to talk about the war, and another when it all happened in reality. The girl imagined that now simple young boys, who have not smelled gunpowder yet, will be taken to the place where they will have to die. When the girl came to the course today, she saw that everyone already knew and prepared to help. Comrades, the instructor who was supposed to teach them about medicine addressed them. Instead of several months of training, we will only have one. The crowd began to whisper, and what will happen then? Shouted one of the young men. You'll probably be taken to the front lines if there are no disabilities of any mutilation, the man replied. What about you? He asked the man defiantly. I too will not be left out. As soon as this wave reaches us, I too will be in the ranks of the Red Army. Young men and girls from that day began to learn medical skill. But if the girls were specifically taught to make bandages, clamp wounds, apply splints, and other things that will be useful to them at the front. The boys were taught practically nothing, only how to help themselves. Not even 2 weeks passed, the summonses came. They came to every house where there was a man, a young man. Girls were not obliged to go to the front, but they could do it voluntarily. Maria decided that as soon as she finished the course, she would immediately go where she was needed most. Maybe first to a hospital, her mother asked her. Here, if they don't take me to the front, I'll definitely go there. The girl packed her things. Archie, cried her mother. She did not understand what a young girl to do there on the front line. But at the same moment, she knew that no one would be left out of this damn war. It will touch every family. Mommy, do not cry. Everything will be fine. The girl believed in it. Because such young, optimistic, and happy people cannot just die like that. Oh my girl, they hugged each other. Maria was waiting for the deadline to come to the military enlistment office. She was delaying because there was nowhere for the apple to fall. All the boys wanted to be there. Some ruled their age. Some just waited. Are you sure you want to go there? The man in the uniform raised his eyes to the girl, who was a little taller than his desk. Of course, she wouldn't have come at all otherwise. She spoke clearly and sonorously. Good. He noted her courses in medicine. That was it. Now Maria was going to where the fighting was. She was both looking forward to it and dreading it at the same time. As they rode in the truck, it seemed to be business as usual, quiet, no war. The girls were brought to some kind of training ground. What are we going to do here? One of them asked. A small exercise, the other, who was older, reassured her. What exercises? That I'm there. My head will not bandage, laughed another. Talkers, they heard a man's voice. Everyone stood still. Now it would not have occurred to anyone to laugh or talk. It was hard. The girls were running, carrying machine guns and heavy bales. These imitated a soldier with his weapons, who would have to be carried from the battlefield. In the evening, all the girls, both older and younger, sat so tired that they could not even lift a hand. Even a spoonful of porridge was heavy. On top of all this, the girls were taught to shoot. A little time passed, and Maria and her friends were ready to go to the front. The girls were put in the car. They talked, laughed. Each did not want to show that she was scared. Maria, who do you have left at home? They asked. Mom, she answered sadly. The girl knew that she would have to stay at home for a reason. She would have to go to the factory. She would get up and go. And I have no one, cried one of the girls. Suddenly, something buzzed above their heads. The car swerved to the right, but it was too late. There was a terrible explosion. One was wounded. The other was thrown aside. Many who remained in the back, they were no longer alive. Maria lay in the bushes. Her ears were ringing. She wanted to see where everyone else was, but she couldn't. Then she closed her eyes and pressed herself to the ground. Somewhere in the distance, something was rumbling, rattling, but to Maria, it was all just a rumble. She lay like that until it was dark. When it was dark and everything was quiet, the girl got up and looked around. Her head was still a little noisy, but her eyes could see normally. Is there someone here? Maria whispered, but no one answered her. She walked forward, all the time hiding behind bushes. In front of the girl saw a wooded area. She decided that it would be easier to move there. She hid behind a tree to look around and then went on. When it started to get light, the girl went into a thick shrubbery. There she sat down, decided to take a nap. Maria, wake up, she heard through her sleep. Who's there? She opened her eyes sharply. But there was no one around, but there were voices somewhere. Maria looked closely, saw that they were Germans, and ran in the opposite direction. Then there was an open space where she had to crawl almost all the time. She didn't know exactly, but it was about 4 days later when she saw wooden log cabins that only came out of the ground a little bit. She realized that this was where ours were, and she rushed over there. There was no strength at all, but she managed. Stop, who's coming? They stopped her as soon as she came into sight. I'm my own Maria. I need to go to the chief, she almost cried. Who's your own? 2 soldiers laughed. But the girl was not to laugh. She fell to her knees from helplessness. The boys picked her up and dragged her to the dugout. There Mary was put on a bench which stood here. At the table sat a man in military uniform and looked at her spitefully. Well, and who are you? Where are you from? Why are you dressed like that? He looked at her without looking away. The girl pulled out of her pocket all the documents she had, put them on the table. What are these? He nodded at them. A Komsomol card, proof that I took a medical course, she began to enumerate. How? He raised his voice. We went, and there was a bombing, scattered, and here I am. Through the woods and fields, straight to you, she began to tell confusedly. At that moment, the man was looking through the papers on the table. I see, we need to sort it out. He stood up. The girl also rose to her feet. She walked over to the table, picked up a pencil, and started drawing on the paper. There she finished, all the while the military man stood behind her and watched. What is it? He did not understand among the squares and dots that Maria had drawn. This is a village. This is an open space. Here is a forest, she began to explain. The dots are guns, and the squares are tanks. And you memorized all this? He squinted. Yes, she nodded. Okay, I'll take you to my location, but watch for me, he wagged his finger. Thank you, and she slumped senseless. Maria was carried away, put on a bed. When she came to her senses, she was fed and given water. Can you get up? A young girl who was next to her asked her. Yes, Maria said confidently. She started to get up. She felt a little dizzy, but she stood for a while and it went away. After that, the girl was ready to go into battle, well, of course, her own. The soldiers immediately noticed this little skirted girl. She was here and there, managed to do everything and everywhere. Praise, the senior soldier said to her. Thank you, I'm not trying for myself, but for the country. Maria was so proud of herself when she managed to drag the wounded to the tent with the medics. Sometimes they had to be knee-deep in clay and mud, but Maria couldn't leave anyone there in the field to die. She had to cover herself. She had to carry a huge man and his weapons. Once on the battlefield, she was shot in the leg. Her body was so sore that she almost broke her teeth when she clenched them to keep from screaming. How are you? The surgeon asked her when she was in the tent. Fine, Maria had already given herself a tight bandage. She lay down on the bed to close her eyes for just a moment. Their tent moved around a lot. The girl never once regretted coming here. And now today it was battle again, explosions all around, and she was dragging this poor guy on her back. She felt that he was helping her, but it didn't make it any easier. She was also afraid that he was seriously wounded, and with these movements he would only make himself worse. Help! She saw two men who were very close by. They rushed over, picked the guy up in their arms and carried him into the tent, then came back for Maria. She was covered in blood, but not her own. Maria went up to the surgeon, asked if she needed anything. He just nodded his head for her to move away. The girl herself did not understand what was happening to her. There were so many people like him. She never paid attention to anyone, but here, it's like some kind of attack. She hadn't even seen his face, but she could feel it in her heart. Can I sit with him? She asked when the fighter was moved to the bed. Please, the doctor answered. He had no time to think about it. Maria sat by the bedside, stroking the young man's head where the bandage was. She left when she had to, but she spent almost all of her free time with the man she had brought here. Who are you? She dozed off and heard his voice. Maria, she opened her eyes and looked at the guy who had come to his senses. And I'm Archie. He wanted to smile, but he didn't do it well. Hello, she looked so tenderly into his blue eyes. Were you the one who got me out of there? He asked the girl. Yes, she wanted to pet him again, but this time she didn't dare. Thank you. He closed his eyes. Maria went for water, brought it to give to the fighter. Here, sweetie, drink it. It'll make you feel better. She tilted the iron mug. What are you babysitting me, Run? You probably need it. He took a sip and did not open his eyes. All quiet for now, she said. Archie was on the mend. He could already sit up on the bed. Maria was helping him with everything. And what, now I'll get on my feet. Will you go out with me? Smiled the guy. What date? The war is around, she grumbled at him. So what? You're so brave. We won't lose. He winked at her. Come on, stop joking. Let's go for a walk. She gave him her hand. In a couple of weeks, Archie was as fit as a horse, though he still had a bandage on his head. Shall we go for a walk? He gave her an elbow. Let's go. The girl grinned. They walked a little way to where the ropes with underwear and bandages were stretched. Maria was taking everything off. He was helping her. I'm probably going to be discharged, he said sadly. And what? You'll go home? There are not enough men's hands, she told him. Where are you from? Archie asked the girl. If I tell you, will you come back after the war? She asked. Yes, he nodded. Only then the girl told him where she had lived before with her parents. "Why are you so sad?" The guy noticed it. "I remembered about Mom and Dad," she honestly admitted. "There was no news from them. Nothing. The victory is coming soon. We'll come home. We'll live like before," Archie told her confidently. "How do you know?" She stared at him. "I know that our people cannot be broken." He clenched his hand into a fist. It was 44. It had been so long since the beginning. So many people were just despairing, doubting that victory would really come. "Maria, what are you with him?" A young nurse came up to her. "Why?" The girl didn't understand the question. "Yes, you know, he is still that walker. Not a single skirt will not miss," said to her that whispered. "I have not seen. I do not know." She turned away from the girl. She saw Archie looking at other girls, but she didn't say anything. They were just chatting. "What are we whispering about?" He came up to them. "About you," Maria said, and looked at him with a look that made him sit up. "What about me?" He was having fun. "That you are a woman hunter." Maria shook another bandage and hung it on the rope. "Don't listen, they're talking." He furrowed his eyebrows and made a serious look. "Oh, that's it. Go already." She didn't want to, but she saw the way the others were looking at them. She didn't want anyone talking about them. Time passed. The young people socialized. He would come in the evening, whistle. She would come out. Archie would grab her by the arm and drag her to the nearest shelter, and there he would start kissing her. "My darling," he whispered to her. "Archie, don't," he said, and she gasped for breath. "Maria, I'm leaving tomorrow," he told her and looked into her eyes. "But I promise I'll be there." And kisses again. "How? Where to?" She tried to push him away so she could talk calmly. "I don't know. Maybe they'll send me home." He breathed heavily. "Will you come?" She squinted her eyes, as if to remind him what they were talking about. "I'll come. I'll definitely come." He pulled her against him. "I'll be waiting." Her head was on his chest. That evening, she ran off to her place and the guy remained standing where they had just been. The next day, she wanted to get up early to see her Archie off, but she didn't have time. One errand another, when she ran out, they were gone. "Don't feel bad. You didn't lose anything." The same girl came up to her. "Fuck you." She didn't look at her. Maria continued to serve, but never forgot about Archie. What a fool. Why didn't she ask where he lived? She reproached herself, but now it was too late to think about it. Maria had been through practically the whole war. In winter, she was wounded, a month in a hospital bed, and then home. "No, I don't want to," she cried, but no one would listen to her. She had done a lot for the front, for the victory, and now, with a serious wound, she had to go home. But what about here? She realized that she would no longer be able to fight as selflessly as before. "Archie, we can manage here without you, and you should go home, get married, have children," said an old woman who also took care of the sick. Maria was sad. She did not want to go anywhere. She got into the car and drove to where she thought her mom was waiting. When she got there and saw the area where they used to live, it got bad. Almost no houses were left. The girl saw in the distance that the hut of grandfather Ivan was not touched, rushed there, then stopped. Why was he not touched? But after Maria saw that many other houses were broken but standing. "Grandpa Evan, what happened here?" She ran into his hut. "Oh, Maria." "Don't ask." He was lying on the bed by the stove. "And mother?" She looked at him with big eyes. "Go to Julia. She will tell you everything," he coughed. The girl ran out of the old man's house and ran to the house of the one who had been close to her since childhood. "Hello." She ran into the porch. The doors were open. Aunt Julia was sitting on a stool near the table. She was looking at one point. Her head was completely gray. "Hello, Maria," she said in a lifeless voice. "What happened?" The girl sat down beside her. "Igor," she showed what she held in her hands. It turned out to be a funeral. Aunt Julia told me afterwards that it was the third. She only had 3 sons, so the war took all 3 of them. "Excuse me, where's Mom?" Maria couldn't help herself. There, she waved her hand behind her back. Maria went inside the house. There was a woman lying on the bed. Yes, she looked remotely like Maria's mother, but the girl did not recognize her. "Mommy," she sat up to the bed. Maria came back. She raised her hand to stroke her daughter's cheek. Tears sprang from her eyes. "What's wrong with you?" her daughter cried next. It's okay. She wrinkled her nose. I can see it's not. Maria pulled back the blanket to examine her mother. Her legs' arms were intact. Then what happened? She crouched down next to her again. Daddy, the woman cried again. Was it because of him that you brought yourself to this? Maria asked. I did not know it became bad. And that's all. Well, Julia came to visit and would have died there. In your place did not wait for you. The woman kept crying. Maria stopped crying. She wiped her tears, went back to Julia. Maria now realized that these two women needed her. So there is nothing to shed tears and longing. We need to live on. Soon the victory. Someone will return. Someone we will never see again. That's life. The girl was only 19 years old, and she was already thinking like that. After that, she went to the place where they lived before the war. Yes, the house was damaged, but it could be cleaned up. Archie would come and we'd fix it up, she said aloud. The girl was determined. She had a lot of work to do. She had to get her mother back on her feet and make sure Aunt Julia didn't get sick. Maria started the household. She washed and laundered everything. Then she took care of her mother. She knew how to do massages. Then she went home and took some herbs that they always had drying in the barn. Her grandmother had taught her how to make potions. Aunt Julia, get up, Maria said every morning. It was not easy for her, but she had to do something to keep the two women alone and bedridden. The spring had been a stormy one. When everything began to bloom, many people began to talk about victory, and Maria believed that soon everything would fall into place. Her mother was already able to move a little. In the morning, she would sit on the bed and Maria would feed her porridge. Julia also cheered up, realizing that it was impossible to bury herself like that. And so May came, followed by the announcement of victory, our victory. People in every corner were celebrating this event. Why are you sitting there crying? A woman asked Maria. And what if he does not come? The girl cried. Who? The aunts became alarmed. Then Maria told them their story with Archie. They knew each other for nothing, the mother wondered. You know what he's like, Maria recalled dreamily. Now she waited for him every day, running to her house, in case he sent word or came, and she was not there. But Archie was still not there. What if he had married already? She looked at Julia as they sat at the table. When did he get married? She grinned. So he was to be discharged before I was, he came. And there are women hungry for men. So he found a wife, Maria assumed. Listen, do not make up, Aunt Julia, though she suffered for her sons, who were now lying somewhere on the battlefields, but already a little even began to joke. Well, I won't talk about him anymore. Marie was sad. The men gradually returned, some without an arm, some without a leg, but most of them looked healthy. The village began to rise. Houses were being put in order. Children began to run along the roads. Maria sat at the window. She looked at the green lawn near the house and dreamed. Isn't that beautiful girl waiting for me? Archie stood right in front of her. What? Maria was so deep in her thoughts, she didn't recognize him. You've forgotten, haven't you? He frowned his eyebrows, just like the other day. Archie, how did you find me? She almost fell out of the window, hugging him. I came where you said, and they sent me here, he smiled. God, alive, and I already thought. She ran outside the fence and began to kiss and hug him. Maria, I promised. How could I not keep my word? He lifted her off the ground. Let's go quickly. Probably hungry from the road, she called him into the house. There wasn't much food, but there was something to eat. The girl sat him down at the table. Aunt Julia came in and started asking questions. She waited. Maria smiled. I can already see that, the woman said resentfully. Archie, her mother called her from the room. What? She came running in. Can you help me? She held out her hands to her daughter. Sure enough, she helped her up, and with the help of the Beethoven and the girl, the woman made her way to the kitchen. Wow, Maria, you've got a fiancé, sat down on the bench. That's enough, the girl got embarrassed. All right, you can go to our house and get settled there, said the woman. And what about you? Maria stopped and looked at her. Well, you are not going to the end of the world, was happy for her daughter Mom. From that moment, Archie and Maria began to live together. He saw what needed to be fixed and immediately went to work. And then, when everything was more or less back to normal, Archie went to get a job. He could do a lot of things. We should get married because the neighbors are already talking, Maria told him. I will, he kissed her. Aunt Julia took her dress out of the closet, the one she was getting married in. Together with Maria's mother, they trimmed it here, sewed it there, added ruffles here, and it turned out very beautiful. Daughter, the dress is ready for you, the women said to her when she came to them. It's beautiful, it's yours, she looked at Julia. And now it will be yours, she hugged and kissed the girl. Thank you. Maria couldn't get enough of him. Although it was still hard in the village, but everyone was invited to the wedding. The villagers took everything they had out of their cellars and chests and set the table. Everyone raised a glass to the young couple. Grandpa Evans sat on a chair. He leaned on the gate and took a harmonica in his hands. It became fun. Then Aunt sang songs. The young people who stayed behind picked up. Maria was a happy bride. She looked at Archie and could not believe that she had saved her husband for herself. From that time, they began to live already as husband and wife. Time passed, and the village grew more and more prosperous. Archie was now working in the field on a combine harvester. Maria liked it very much. She went to the local Mercer station and worked part-time. Maria, your that to Cindy yesterday came by, said to her grandmother Zena, who came for help. He was just hungry. Maybe he didn't listen to her. She was on her way home to talk to her husband. You're at it again. Not for nothing I was told that not a single skirt do not miss. She stood over him with a towel in his hands. Who are you listening to again? He was sitting at the table. Grandma Zina said that you were at Nakis, she confessed to him. Really? He made big eyes. And if I see or hear you again, you'll go back to where you came from. The girl didn't stop. She had a lot of courage. Archie, I only love you. He held out his hands to her. Yeah, she turned away, but did not cry, so as not to show weakness. 2 years after the wedding, Maria felt that she was expecting a child, made her husband happy with this news. He only smiled, was happy. At that time, Maria had helped on the field. There were not enough hands, and there was a lot to do. She lifted up a pitchfork with straw, and it was as if something tore in the bottom of her stomach. Ouch, she screamed. The women immediately realized what was happening and picked her up, but only just managed to bring her to the edge. What are you doing? Who does such things at this age? Shouted at her one of the older in the brigade. Petrovna, enough, we need rags, commanded Selena. Her mother used to be a midwife. As soon as this was said, everyone immediately took off their top skirts and covered the ground with them. That's when one of the combines stalled. Hey, have you fallen asleep? The men shouted. Oh, look, there's a girl giving birth, and Archie doesn't care about anything, just to look at someone's ass, said one of the women. Some laughed. Others watched the process. Some of them ran after Selena's mother, who was already old, but she knew her job, and Maria was lying there breathing heavily. Come on, disperse, they heard a squeaky voice. They looked around. Grandmother Gudia came. She sat down in front of the woman in labor and began to give commands. Soon a child's cry was heard over the field. Archie, you have a girl, the men shouted to the happy father. At that moment, Maria was loaded on a cart and was already being taken with the child to the place where she was working part-time. And what to do here? You have already done everything. The worker of the medical center waved her hands. Maria was happy for the second time in her life. She was holding the little baby she loved so much. Archie, come here, she called to her husband. What? He quietly came up behind her and put his arm around his wife. Together they watched their daughter sleeping in the crib. Let's have another one. She turned to him. Whatever you say, my love. He kissed her. There was no time to sit with the child. It was necessary to work, but Maria was dissuaded. They said that until spring you can rest, and the daughter needs a mother's affection. She languished in idleness at home. Maria, one day the chairman came to see her. Yes, she didn't expect it. What happened? Your husband. He wagged his finger, took off his hat and sat down. What has he done again? Maria blushed. He was watching the milkmaids changing clothes. They saw him and squealed. He wiped the sweat from his forehead. Again sighed Maria. She had enough of such stories. When their men get together, they'll give your Archie a hard time. He stood up and headed for the door. I'll talk, she promised. And at that moment, little Leslie came into the kitchen. Her mother took her in her arms and cried. How happy she was with him. But this bad habit of his did not give her peace, in front of all the neighbors already ashamed. Were you crying? He came home. You can cry here? The chairman came. She looked at him. So what? I took one look. He didn't even hide it. What's wrong with me that you stare at them? She didn't understand. I can't tell you the answer to that. I just like it. That's all, he said. When Leslie was 2 years old, her mother was pregnant again. Now no one would let her go to work when her belly was already big. This time she gave birth with the help of all the same Baba Goody, only in normal conditions. This time the couple had an hair berry. Thank you, wife, you've done well, her husband hugged her. Enough already, she jerked her shoulder. There was more work to do around the house. Maria asked Aunt Julia and her mother, who was staying with her, to look after Leslie while she took care of Barry. She should go to a nursery, the women said. But what kind of kindergarten in the village? Once there was a normal one. But after the war, only ruins remained. In one hut, the former teacher organized a group. But how many people were in it? As Selena says, so we'll lead it, Maria answered. She continued to work, just like her husband. Maria, I'm going to kill your Archie. Mickey came up to her. He was Cindy's husband and Archie liked to visit her. What again? She sighed and blushed. You shouldn't be hanging around other people's women. He showed his big fist. I'm sorry he's a concussion, but he only comes in to eat, and if Cindy hadn't made him feel welcome, he wouldn't have come in. I warned you, the man was getting away from her. Maria couldn't take it anymore. When her husband came home from work, she suggested he move to the city. Are you, mother, fallen out of your mind? How can we go there? He looked at her dumbfounded. Normal. You'll get a job at the factory. Hands are golden. I'm still at home with the baby, she said. And where does this house? He was puzzled. We'll see. While we can go to my brother. She could not find anything else to say. Well, look, you're fearless. He shook his head. I can't listen to these complaints anymore. You'll be killed. And what? I'll be left alone with the kids. She stared at him without taking her eyes off him. Okay, wait a bit, we'll move, Archie promised her. Maria waited, but her husband did nothing to make what she said come true, so she started to find out for herself. She went to Aunt Julia's house. Hello, she entered the house. And good day to you. The women greeted her. They had just gone to the bath and were sitting at the table. Leslie, come in. She held Barry in her arms. A bath? Julia thought. We can go to the baths, Maria said. She undressed the children and took 2 of them in at once. When they were all washed and drunk with tea, a serious conversation began. Aunt Julia, don't you have a brother in town? Maria asked. You know I do, the woman wondered. Why the conversation? How could I get Archie to live there? And then I would come with my children, she began from afar. Listen, if he to the factory, he will be immediately allocated housing, especially family, as if she remembered. Well, and if to your brother, at least for the first night, insisted Maria. Of course, let him go. I don't think he will refuse. The woman was sure of it. Well, thank you. Give me the address, asked the girl, and Julia immediately wrote it on a piece of paper. Maria gathered up the children and went home. She was walking past Cindy's house when her Archie came out of the gate. What were you doing out there again? She asked him, and it took him by surprise. Jesus, you scared him. What are you doing here? He was holding his heart. Went to see Julia. Answer the question, she stepped on him. Archie, I was just passing by, and I saw Cindy making pies, so I thought I'd drop in. He justified himself. Would it bother you if Mickey was here? Come on, let's go to your Cindy's house. She put her son in his father's arms and went to the gate. Hello, neighbor, she opened the door. Maria, how are you? Cindy wasn't scared, just surprised. I came to ask you why you feed other men's husbands pies, she said, putting her hands to her sides. Yes, he comes himself, and why not treat? And the woman waved her hands. And what does your husband say to you about it? Archie promises to kill him. Maria looked at her. What's Mickey got to do with it? She looked at the guest. What's that got to do with it? He's your husband, Maria wondered. We're just having tea, she fussed in the kitchen. Tell him that. She turned around and left the house. Her husband wasn't at the gate, He must have gone home with the children, and Maria went the same way. What are you starting? You're embarrassing me for the whole village, Archie told her at home. And you don't embarrass me, the village, 3 people. Everyone knows everything about each other. And he's getting on, she put the kettle on. Okay, I promise I won't come round again, he promised her. Maria lay at night and thought, now they are in the village, she knows everything. And what will happen if they move to the city? No one would say anything to her, and her husband would go out with girls. She couldn't sleep. She kept tossing and turning from side to side. In the morning, she was very sleep deprived. Maria, get up, Archie said loudly. I hear you're up, she stretched and got out of bed. The children were still asleep, and she went to the kitchen to make breakfast. In the evening, she gave her husband the address of Julia's brother. She told him to go and see him over the weekend and find out everything. Mickey did. He agreed with his wife on everything. There's a shortage of hands at the factory. They'll hire you there today. Anthony met him. What about housing? That was Archie's biggest concern. You'll ask there, the man said. When the work week began, Archie had been in the human resources department since morning, waiting for his bosses to be free. As soon as the man walked in there, he stood up and walked over. Hello, and I'm here to see you for a job, mumbled Archie. Okay, write an application, said the man tiredly. And housing? Archie was as simple as 3 pennies. And with this, we need to think, stopped the boss. I have a family, children, added the newcomer. All right, let's go, called him into the office. They entered, sat down at the table, and then some papers were placed in front of Archie. What's this? He didn't understand. Look, I have an old house. If your hands grow from where you need, you'll do everything. You'll live or a hostel, raised his eyes boss. I agree on the house. Archie remembered how after the war he came to Marie. He had to remodel almost half the house. Nothing. How fast you are, the man told him. If you work like that, you won't be a laborer for long. Archie liked being noticed by the man who was hiring him. Now he would do anything to stay here. He had a week to move his family. How could it be so fast? Maria couldn't understand. She was hurriedly packing. And what to drag? Here you have a job, a place to live. Come and enjoy life, he said cheerfully. Maria went to her mother to tell her that they were leaving in the morning. She was only happy for her daughter. You just don't forget, come back, the woman said. I will, as soon as we get settled, and immediately promised her daughter. And what about my brother? Julia asked. And what will he be? Lives, works. Archie did not say much about him. That's how they said goodbye. In the morning, Archie, Maria, Leslie, and Barry were at the bus stop with big bales. Not there. Are you moving? One of the locals asked them, who was also going somewhere. Yeah, to the city. I got a job there, Archie said. That's good, the woman nodded. They didn't talk again. When they got there, they were all tired. What a wreck. Maria looked at the house. It'll be fine, her husband promised her. We'll see, she sighed, realizing that there was a lot of work to be done. Until the weekend, the new owners were doing something, sweeping, washing, slapping. Archie was outside pounding something. His wife didn't say anything to him. She looked out into the yard to call him for lunch and saw him stuck to the fence. What did you see again? She came up to him. Nothing, I'm just looking at the neighbor's property, he said. Maria looked, and there is a neighbor working. Ah, and how is it in their vegetable garden? She asked her husband. He blushed. Well, that's how it is. He waved his hands. She took his hand and they went into the house together. And since Monday, her husband went to work. Maria stayed at home for the time being. She knew that here, unlike in the village, there were kindergartens, so she went there. Leslie was accepted at once, but there was no place for Barry. But she was promised a place as soon as possible. Oh, Archie, I feel sick again. Maria woke up in the morning feeling dizzy. The third? He guessed. She must have gone outside. Should have gone to the hospital, but there was no time for that. When her mother went to pick up Leslie at daycare that evening, she was told she could bring Barry too. That was happy news. Now the woman could go about her business without the distraction of the children. Well, how are you doing? Asked after work happy father of the family. Bad, wrinkled wife. The third pregnancy was very difficult. If the first 2, she did not even notice that in her body something is happening, but now there was no such thing. Understandably, he sat down at the table to eat dinner. At that moment, there was a knock on the door. "Yes," shouted Archie from his seat. A pretty woman entered the house. "Hello, my name's Kathy. I'm your neighbor. I saw you coming a long time ago, but we've never met," she said and took off her shoes. "Do you know how to make pies?" Maria didn't know what had gotten into her. "What's that got to do with it?" She looked at her. "No, it's just that my husband doesn't eat mine. He likes to bake from neighbors." His wife turned to him. "Oh, what are you talking about?" Katie was embarrassed. Maria realized that all this is not for nothing. "And do you live alone or with your husband?" Maria felt bad, but she pulled herself together. "My husband went missing in action in '44, the woman said. "I'm sorry," Maria realized she was being tactless. "It's all right," smiled the neighbor. She went to the table and put a pot on it. "What's that?" Archie sniffed. "Here, I made dumplings. I wanted to treat the neighbors," she said cheerfully. "So come to us more often with treats so that Archie does not run to you," said Maria. "All right, then we'll be friends." She sat down at the table. No one else nudged anyone else. Everyone sat in a friendly manner. Even the children from the room came in. "You have a lovely family." Katie said goodbye to them. "Thank you, come on in," Maria said good-naturedly. When the neighbor left, the wife looked at her husband. "What?" He turned to her. "Did you like it?" Maria smiled. "No," he averted his eyes. "Archie," she showed him a fist. "I figured it out a long time ago," he said guiltily. "I hope so." His wife got up and went to the children. It was so bad she couldn't breathe properly. A month later, it all started. "Archie," Maria screamed. The man rushed to her. "What to do? We need to go to the hospital, but how?" Then the man ran to Katie. She said she would help. They entered the house, took Maria under the arms, and led. Every step was difficult. "Why didn't you say something before?" Archie was breathing hard. "When I dragged you to the field, it was all right," she said, gritting her teeth and enduring the pain. At this point, Kathy looked at Archie. She didn't know their story, so she was very surprised. "I'll tell you later." He realized what his neighbor was thinking right now. Good, she was having a hard time too. But lo and behold, the building where they were going showed up, and in that moment, it was as if the strength had been added. Maria was put on a stretcher and carried away. "And you, Daddy, come back tomorrow." The woman in the white coat closed the door in front of the man. Okay, he said, and he and Katie walked back home. So what was the story? She couldn't wait to find out, and Archie told her straight out about meeting Maria. "That's how it was," he said. "After that, you should carry her in your arms." Katie was amazed. "I am," Archie said. This time, the family had a girl again named Angelica. The mother was happy. There would be helpers in the house. But Archie was a little gloomy. He wanted a son. "But nothing, if it works out, you'll have a son," Maria reassured him. Time passed, the children grew up, and Angelica went to kindergarten. Leslie went to school, and Maria wanted to go to work. When she finally got a job, she was like a chain. She got a job at the same factory as her husband, only not in the shop, but in the administration itself. If she was told to do something, she quickly grabbed the job, and after a while it was already done. "Well, Maria, you're a valuable person," praised Maddie, who was here with her. "Just stayed home a long time, did nothing, missed you." She was telling the truth. "What do you mean you haven't done anything? What about the kids? What about the house?" "It's all routine," Maria smiled. "I see. And with your husband, how is it with you?" Maddie sat down next to her. "And why do you ask?" Maria tensed. "Just, you don't think anything." She immediately perked up. "It's fine," she answered her question. "Good." Maddie went to her seat. Then she said that there were more things to do and left the office. Maria sat there thinking that Archie might have messed up here as well. She wondered who to ask, but she never came to any conclusion. And in the evening, she had to go to the garden, pick up the children. After that, help Leslie with her studies and cook dinner. But it was all to Marie's satisfaction. "Where were you so long?" she asked her husband, who arrived 3 hours after her. When the men sat down, he came up to his wife. She heard a smell from him. "What are you doing?" She made big eyes. Yes, they could get together at the table and drink a little, but to have it like this in the middle of the week, it was impermissible. Now the woman was also afraid of what her colleagues or neighbors would say to her. "What's the big deal?" A little relaxed, he answered her. Go to bed, Maria told him menacingly. In the morning, when she came to work, the whole factory was already judging about yesterday's situation. Maria, did you hear that? Maddie came over to her again. About what? The woman was afraid to hear it. What did the men do last night? She was ready to tell, but she saw that Maria was not very interested. What was it? She couldn't sit there and take Maddie's stare. They got together after work in the locker room, got drunk, and then went after the women in their shop to peep, she said, and put her hand over her mouth. Jesus, here we go again, and she blushed. What? Yours was there too? Maddie was blushing now. You didn't know. Maria looked away, thinking that Archie was the one who'd gotten everyone to do it. Sorry, Maddie left the office. Yeah, go pick up more gossip, Maria told her. She didn't know how to look people in the eye at the gatehouse. Even though she didn't know who the women were, she felt like they were all looking at her, so she looked away. Archie, she couldn't stand it when he was home. What did I do? I just looked. He couldn't understand. Disgraced yourself and dragged me along with you. I can't look people in the eye now, she answered him. What did we see there? He started to eat what his wife gave him. And on the weekend, Maria went to her neighbor's house to distract herself and talk. How's it going? She'd set the table. Why did you come alone? I didn't want Archie to come, Maria admitted honestly. Are you in some kind of trouble? Katie guessed. Yeah, he's in trouble and has been for a long time, she shook her head. And what is it, if it's not a secret? The neighbor became curious. You see, he has some kind of mania. He likes to peep. Maria did not raise her eyes because she was ashamed. What's the big deal? Lots of people like to read letters and peek in windows, sat down across from her Katie. He only peeps on women, Maria admitted then. Well, that's not nice, she blushed. Why? Maria didn't understand her embarrassment. Yes, I just thought, sometimes from the bathhouse I go in one shirt, and if he looks uncomfortable as it is, she blushed even more. I told him, peep after me, even when I go to the bath. I leave the window not curtained. But no, he said, not interesting. She again stared at the table. So here with permission and they're not, laughed Katie. They talked some more and Maria went home. The kids were waiting there. After she talked to her neighbor, it felt a little better. Archie was in the kitchen waiting for her. Why are you sitting here? My wife was surprised. No reason, he smiled. Talk, she realized. Everything was for a reason. Maria, the bosses called us in today. He turned away. So what? She realized the rumors had reached there. Everyone was reprimanded, and in public, he knew his wife would find out anyway. It was better to confess himself. Did you get it? She just said it and went to the kids. I wanted to cry. Well, why did she get him so? And again, she remembered the words of that nurse, that in vain she looked at him. But Maria still loved him, and the feeling was exactly the same as when she had sat by his bedside. Children, let me read you a story, she said to them when they were already in bed. Hooray, they shouted with glee. In a certain kingdom, in a certain state, began to read the mother. Archie heard from the kitchen as Maria began the story, realized she would never come out to him again. He too was worried about what was happening to him, but he couldn't help himself when he saw a pretty girl. He continued to work, and Maria kept up. They never went to the factory together, always separately. Maria, until she divorced all the children, only then went to the office. Well, how are your children, friend? Maddie asked her. They had worked together for so many years that they knew everything about each other. Good, Leslie is helping the younger ones with their assignments, the woman said. And her husband? The coworker looked at her like she knew something again. What's my husband got to do with it? She hadn't heard he was involved in anything in a long time. I was just asking. She looked away. Maddie, if you know something, tell me, Maria insisted. I don't know anything. I was really just asking. The woman started to work. She was counting something. In the evening, Maria decided to ask Archie what had happened. She prepared dinner, sat down at the table, and waited for Archie. Hi, he came into the house. Tell me, she looked at him. What? He looked at her. I don't know. What's going on at the factory again? She didn't take her eyes off him. Maria. He averted his eyes. Maria, am I going to be ashamed of you again? She got up and started to set the table. No, he sat down. What then? She put a cup in front of him. We were in the bathhouse at the weekend with the men, so one of them said that he knew a place where you can peek at the women who wash in the next ward. He blushed. Why are you blushing now? You didn't blush then. She sat down opposite her husband again. What am I doing? I'm not touching them. I'm just looking, he said. And he believed that there was nothing wrong with it. I'm not saying anything, but why do I have to blush all the time? She was ready to cry. Don't listen to anyone. He started eating. The kids will grow up soon. If they find out, or at school, what then? She couldn't understand what his craving was. And nothing, he did not begin to explain, because he himself did not understand it. Leslie was already in the final grade. It was necessary to understand that the girl has grown up, will soon build her own life. Mom, an address for me to make, she asked Maria. Of course, I even know a wonderful seamstress, the woman said about her mother. The last time they had visited her was about 3 months ago. The woman was living in her house again. Even then they had talked about it. Is she sure she'll make it beautiful? The girl didn't want to fall in the mud. Of course, the woman hugged her. This weekend, we are going to my mother, Maria told her husband in the evening. Do I have to be there? He looked at her. No, you can stay with Barry and Angelica, the woman said. Well, why aren't they coming with you? He wondered, since they were there as a family every time. Leslie and I are on a business matter. The wife didn't go into the subject. That's what we decided. Maria at the factory got a beautiful fabric. At the weekend, they were already sitting at the table in the village. Look what we brought. Maria took out a piece of fabric from her bag. This will make a very beautiful dress, thought the grandmother. Immediately heard to Leslie. What kind? The girl was curious. You'll see. Show her your wedding dress, asked her mother. Maria pulled out of the closet that dress, which once made her Aunt Julia and her mother. Oh, it's beautiful. Leslie appreciated it. There, and you doubted it. Her grandmother kissed her. The next morning, mother and daughter were home because they were busy. Now their house was being expanded. Archie decided to do some construction and add another room, and the land allowed for it. Everything all right? His wife asked him. What could be abnormal? He wondered. Just by asking, Maria knew that if there was something abnormal, she would definitely hear rumors. Right now, all she was doing was helping the kids with their studies, going to work, and doing chores around the house. It's been a long time since Kathy's been here, Archie said. Come and see what she's doing. She laughed at her husband. Well, don't be like that. He lowered his eyes. All closed the subject. Maria realized that the conversation for her husband unpleasant. Mom, tell me about the war. Barry came running into the kitchen. Sit down, she showed him the seat next to her. Then came in Leslie and Angelica. They liked to listen to the stories that told Mom. Oh, why do you listen to her? She has some dull stories. Do you want me to tell you one? Archie, why don't you? Maria looked in his direction. No, why not? If the children want to know, he smiled. Tell me, they were already shouting. So we are lying with a comrade in an ambush, around snow, cold, and we cannot move. In front of the enemy, we need to find out where they have a ZOT. After that to inform their own, and then the battle, said quietly Father. Yeah, you tell me that you jumped out of the trench and first went to the ZOT to cover their bullets while they do their job, laughed Maria. Why are you always messing things up? He asked her. Why are you messing with the kids? She took offense as to why he couldn't tell the moment he was wounded before they met. She herself had asked him several times and he wouldn't tell. And now she reminded him of it. Okay, look, he exhaled. You're really going to tell me? Marie couldn't believe it. I will. He folded his hands on the table. Ready to listen. So many years have passed. She already did not hope to hear that legendary story. We were sitting in the trench, and suddenly, the offensive. The commander shouted, attack, and we were shaking, but we couldn't sit, because the order was given not a step back, so everyone jumped out. Only the machine gunners were left, running like fools, yelling hurrah, with the commander behind us. It's not clear who was running where, but as soon as the explosion started, so ended our bravado. You know the rest. He was sitting there, not looking at anyone. Dad, you're our hero, Barry said loudly. Thanks, son, but I'm no hero, shook his head. Mary felt so sorry for him at that moment. She sat up to him and stroked his head, just like she had at the hospital, kissed him on the cheek. "Even if you are a hero or not, I still love you," she whispered to him. "And I love you." The children saw for the first time how like this, mom and dad sit side by side and confess their love to each other. They will never forget this moment, and then they will tell their children and grandchildren. It was graduation time, and Leslie was getting ready for the day. "Mom, and how was your graduation?" asked her daughter then, and Maria remembered that day, but did not say anything. "Good," she smiled. "Hopefully, and we will be fine." The girl was happy, also because of the fact that her grandmother sewed her such a beautiful dress that all the girls should be jealous. After graduation, Leslie was going to enter the institute, which is far from home. "Why did you choose this one?" Her mother didn't understand. "I do not know, just I want to be an engineer," answered the daughter. She knew that the local factory requires such a profession, so she decided to study and then return. "And how will you go home?" The mother was only worried about that. "Everything will be fine on vacation," came up and hugged her daughter to her mother. At that moment, Maria realized how her mother felt when she, even at a younger age, was going to war. Here she was, Leslie going just to study, and she was so worried about her. "Well," she kissed her, "may you be well. You've got Barry before Angelica. They won't let you get bored," laughed the older daughter. "That's for sure," smiled the mother. She was happy that she had such a family, all alive, healthy, loving each other. In the middle of the summer, the daughter left. The mother and father saw her off. "Don't cry," Archie hugged his wife. "I'm not crying." Maria brushed a tear from her eyelashes. It seemed to her that not long ago she was lying on the edge of the field and gave birth to her, Leslie. And now she was leaving her parents' house. "Let's go home." He gave her an elbow and they headed down the road. Again, work, home, kids, every day was busy. "So, has yours settled down?" She came to visit Katie one day. "I don't know." Nobody's saying anything yet. Maria looked at her. She was afraid to hear such talk. As soon as it started, it meant Archie had snooped again. No, don't look at me like that. I don't know anything," laughed the woman. Maria came home. Everything was quiet. She went to bed and wondered if it was the calm before the storm, and she was right. "Barry, isn't Daddy home yet?" she asked her son. "No," he shook his head in the negative. It was strange. Maria had been a little late at work today, filing reports, but she hadn't seen him at the factory either. She cooked dinner, fed the children. They had already gone to bed, but her father was still not home. Maria was worried about what might have happened. She threw on her coat and went to Katie's. No, she didn't want to find her husband there, just wondering where to look. "What are you doing up so late?" Her neighbor greeted her. "Archie still hasn't come home yet," Maria said excitedly. "Come in." The woman let her in. "What to do?" "I don't know what to do." She sat at Zoya's table and drank tea. "Maybe we should go to the factory. They like to get together with the men there." "No, to go there, disgrace yourself. And what if they are now in someone's shed, and I'll come hello?" Did not agree with her guest. "That's right too." Katie didn't know how to help at all. "I think if something had happened, you would have been told about it long ago," she summarized. "Yes, thank you." Maria hurried home, in case her husband had already arrived, and now he had lost her. But when she crossed the threshold of the lady, she realized that no one was here. She sat down at the table, put her head on her hands. Different thoughts went into her head. Maria cried, tried several times to go to bed, because tomorrow morning she had to go to work, but she could not sleep. In the morning, Archie appeared, wearing a torn coat. "Where have you been?" His wife ran up to him. His odor was so pungent she couldn't even understand what it was. "I'm sorry, my dear." He sank down on the chair that stood there. "What for? Answer me. Where were you all night?" His wife pounded him on his back and shoulders. "Tomorrow you will find out for yourself." It was obvious that he felt bad. Maria realized that both she and her husband had to get ready for work. She went out into the yard, threw a couple of logs into the sauna stove to warm up the water a little, and then sent her husband there. He did not say anything, went quietly, washed himself. But that strange odor still did not go away. After that, his wife gave him new clothes. Then Maria woke up the children, sent them to school, and went to work, where her husband had already gone. "Maria, "You are called to the assembly hall," ran an excited Mighty. "Do you know what happened?" The woman wanted to be a little prepared for what was coming. "No, I was just asked to call you." Her eyes were running. "Don't you have to be there?" Maria realized that her colleague knew something, but didn't want to talk. "I'll come back later," she said. Maria walked on wobbly legs to the place where she was called. She sat down in a chair. There were already a lot of factory workers here. The boss came on stage, greeted everyone. "And now I will ask to come out those for whom we are gathered here." Maria saw that a policeman was sitting near the stage. Everything trembled inside. 3 men came through the door, Archie among them. All of them walked with droopy heads. The man in uniform stood up. These fellows had had too much to drink this night and were disorderly in the streets, he began to say. What were they doing? A question came from the audience. They were looking into the windows of the first floors, loudly discussing what they saw, and then singing songs, explained the representative of the law. And then, everyone was interested. The patrol car took everyone to the sobering up center. As soon as he said these words, the hall was filled with gasps. "Well, why are you silent? Comrades, are not you ashamed to look in the eyes of your colleagues?" He turned to the 3 men who stood in front of everyone. Ashamed, Archie looked furtively into the hall. He looked for his wife with his eyes. "Why are you silent then?" The policeman did not stop talking. "We apologize and promise not to do it again," one of them said. "All this is good, but you get a strict reprimand. One more such incident, and you will no longer work at this company," took the word of the chief. The trio stood with their heads down. They had nothing to say. "I also know that the wife of one of you is present here. Please stand up," the policeman asked again. Maria's cheeks flamed. She couldn't get off the seat. She was so uncomfortable with the whole thing. "Well, where are you?" His eyes ran around the hall, looking for a woman. "It's me, hello." Maria finally stood up. "And how are you not ashamed? Your husband does such things. I was told that this is not his first prank. How do you put up with all this?" He began to reprimand her like a little girl. "I'm sorry, I didn't know. I was at work." She looked down at the floor. "If this happens again, measures will be taken," the policeman said sternly. "I understand you." She was ready to fall under the ground, just not to listen to all this now. Maria went to her office. The workers who passed by whispered something behind her back, but now it didn't matter. "So, how did it go?" Maddie was sitting in her seat. "Did they talk to you?" Maria asked her. She guessed how the policeman knew about his wife. "No," she made big eyes. "Good." Maria left the office. She was disgusted to be here. Now the feeling of shame was so strong that she just wanted to write a statement and not to appear here ever again. In the evening she came home. Her husband was already there. "I'm sorry," he was sitting at the table. "What are you talking about? You swear to me every time, but you repeat nonsense. And every time it brings more shame." She began to shout. "I don't know why this is happening," he shrugged. "How old are you? Think about it. You went through the war, you have medals, and you do this." She sank down beside him without strength. "Honey, I promise." He sat like that. He didn't move. "I don't care about your promises if you can't keep them. Think of your children, what they think of you." She spoke almost in a whisper. I understood. Archie didn't know what else to say to his wife. Mary came home from school once again. "Mom, I've got something serious to talk to you about." He stood in front of her. "Okay, talk." She looked at her son. He was as handsome as his father. "I have decided that I will continue to study at the school. I want to become a military man, like Dad." He shocked her. "What are you, son?" She hugged him and cried. "Why not?" The boy didn't understand. "Do you know what discipline is like there?" She recalled her courses before she got to the battlefield. "No worse than what you and your father went through," Barry said. The mother realized that her boy had grown up and now had an opinion of his own. "Fine, do as you see fit." She was proud of the boy for making that decision. The year passed quietly. Archie got home on time every day. Maria thanked him to herself for that. Barry was preparing to enroll. His desire hadn't changed. "Am I going to be alone with you?" Angelique asked. "What will that change?" Her mother hugged her. "It will be boring," the girl said sadly. "Everything will be all right." The woman always supported her children in everything. The summer after Barry left, Leslie arrived. While she was away, the girl had grown up. "Hi, honey, how are you?" Her parents hugged her. She was fine. She averted her eyes. What's wrong? Her mother didn't understand. Mom, can I talk to you one-on-one? Asked her daughter. Of course. They retired to their room. I met a wonderful man. He looks after me. We studied together. The daughter spoke incomprehensibly. It was obvious that she was worried. It's okay. You're an adult. Maria inwardly worried about her daughter. He proposed to me, Leslie said quickly. That was the end of all dating, of course. She didn't want her daughter to experience family life and everything that came with it so early. He's coming here soon to meet you. She didn't look at her mom. For some reason, she was embarrassed. Good, and we'll meet him properly. The woman was happy that everything was happening in the open. Billy arrived 2 weeks later. He was a tall, black-haired guy. He and Leslie were very much suited to each other. I'm very happy to meet you, he said to his girlfriend's parents. And we are too. Archie gave him his hand. They sat down together at the table and started discussing when and where they were planning to get married, how they were going to study, and where they were going to live after that. The Institute has offered to give us a room after we get married, Billy said confidently. That's good. So they already have a roof over their heads. Their mother was happy for them. We'll probably have the wedding here, if you don't mind, he said. Of course not, but Leslie was going to go back and work at the local factory, and now her plans haven't changed. She asked the young man. No, I don't mind if they take me, he said, blushing. What's the big deal? 2 young specialists with higher education. Why won't they take me? The woman was surprised. Archie, what a good man our daughter got, she said to her husband in the evening. Yeah, he was looking out the window. What? He saw young girls? Maria realized. Sorry, he pulled the curtain. You need to heal. That wound has messed up your brain. She went over to him. No matter what her husband did, Maria couldn't blame him. She loved him so much she could forgive any offense. She realized that soon they would probably be grandparents, but that was only good news. Barry was writing letters saying he was doing well. Leslie and Billy were getting ready to get married. Angelica was in school. Everyone seemed to be doing well. Archie hadn't done anything like that since the sobering up incident. Now he liked to sit by the window and look out at the street. You know what I think? Maria sat down with him the other day. What? He turned to her. Billy and Leslie will get married, go away to study, and when they finish the institute and get a job at the factory, we'll get them this house. She put her head on her husband's shoulder. He did not understand. He looked at his wife with surprised eyes. Angelica will finish school by that time. She will enter. She will leave us. What are we going to do here? The woman spoke and looked at the wall. Where will we go? Archie still didn't understand her. We'll go back to the village. You know, it's nice there now, Maria said. I don't know. We'll live to see it. He turned back to the window. His wife got up and went to see what her daughter was doing. Maria was home that day. It was a day off. Billy and Leslie had gone to pick out rings. Angelica was in her room. There was a knock on the door. The woman got up, opened the door. It was the letter carrier. Maria tensed. One doesn't just knock on doors. One just drops it in the mailbox. An urgent telegram for you. He put a sheet in the woman's hands. She read it immediately. Her legs felt weak. Thank you, she said, and closed the door. Maria then walked to a chair and sat down. What happened? Her husband came through the door. He met the mailman. As if someone had hurt me, she handed her husband a paper that said her mother was dying. Let's go, Archie said confidently. That same day, the whole family, including Volodya, arrived in the village. Mom, Maria came home. It's over. The woman barely spoke. What are you saying? Cried the daughter. Sorry, the woman also cried. Grandma, Leslie and Angelica hugged her. She didn't say anything, just looked at Billy. This is my fiancé, but it looks like the wedding won't be for a while yet. Leslie couldn't hold back her tears. I've been waiting for you, the woman said. Where's your medicine? Maria asked. Over there, pointed her mother to the nightstand. Maria went over and looked. There was nothing there that could help with her illness. Mommy, she sat down directly on the floor by the bed where the woman was lying. Let's go to the hospital. No, she shook her head. I want to die at home. They spent 3 long days here. The woman was dying in agony. She was screaming so much it made everyone uncomfortable. Finally, she called out to her daughter. What is it, Mommy? Maria took her hand. "I love her," was all she said, and closed her eyes. "Archie," Maria wailed like a wounded animal. "Calm down." He came over and picked her up off the floor and held her to him. "It's my fault," she snuggled into his chest. "What are you blaming yourself for?" He couldn't understand. "Didn't go to her as often as I should have," the woman shouted. "Mommy, calm down." Leslie and Angelica were inconsolable too. They were standing now, embraced by the whole family. Only Barry was missing. But he couldn't even make it to his grandmother's funeral. "There goes our house," Maria said lifelessly as the neighbors dispersed after the wake. "Maria, stop it. You couldn't see your wife like that, Archie." "Why, as soon as I mentioned it, she died suddenly. She knew her daughter wanted to move here." She raised her eyes red with tears to him. "It's okay. Mom loved you and never blamed you for anything. They are there now, next to your dad." Her husband spoke into her ear. They cleaned everything in the house, locked it up, and drove back to town. Billy and Leslie left the rings with their mother, their wedding delayed for a while. Their parents had suggested a winter wedding, but their daughter only wanted it in the summer. They decided that they'd come back in a year, and then they'd get married. "Mom, do you remember the dress in which you got married?" Leslie asked her. Of course, how could she forget it? "Can I wear it too?" The girl hoped for a positive answer. "Yes, here we'll go to the village. I'll take it. I'll make a new insertion," said the mother. Okay, they hugged. In a week, the couple was going to leave again to study. Now they would see each other only in the new year. Maria was bored. Now all her love was directed only to her youngest daughter. She was in and out of work. She had no interest there. She never spoke to Maddie after that moment. She made some movements towards Mary, but the woman did not react in any way. They only talked about work stuff. The story with the sobering up station was talked about until others failed and got caught in another situation. Then Archie and Maria were forgotten. They began to discuss others. The year went by without a hitch, and then Barry arrived for the vacations. His mother and father were so happy about the surprise. "We thought you'd come later," Maria said. "I just got here." He hugged his parents. Studying at the military school was not in vain. The son became more responsible. He had grown up. He had become so mature. Maria cried. Finally, they waited for Billy and Leslie. Her mother, as promised, had prepared her dress. The rings were already there. It was only necessary to decide on the place. It was decided to celebrate in a restaurant. "Isn't it expensive?" Billy asked then. "Nothing would be a pity for my daughter," the future father-in-law answered him. "Good," agreed the young man. Several people from the village were invited to the wedding. Billy and Leslie's girlfriends and friends. Maria invited Kathy, and Archie invited his few friends. It was fun. The young ones, so beautiful, sat at the head of the table. Mom and Dad congratulated. It was a shame Grandma had not lived to see this moment. "Thank you." After the feast, the young parents thanked. "What are you talking about?" Maria hugged them. Now Billy and Leslie were husband and wife. They spent a few more days at the girls' parents and went to build their life together. Barry departed as well. It was sad, but the kids were grown and they needed to be let go. "Angelica, are you ready for your prom night?" Her mother asked her as the years of her high school years passed. Sure enough, Angelica had become a beauty. Her parents were proud of their daughter. Billy and Leslie were to come. They said for good, but Barry was unknown. A young man after graduating from the Suvorov school was preparing to go on. Angelica was irresistible. Her father and mother bought her a dress in which the girl shone. About the same one my grandmother once sewed for me, entered Leslie's house. Her daughter, her mother began to hug her. She hadn't seen her since last summer. The guys were in their senior year, studying for exams, practicing and writing their diplomas. "And I'm glad to see you too." Leslie stood in the aisle, not letting her husband pass. "How are you?" Their father looked at them expectantly. "Do you want to ask about the diplomas?" smiled her daughter. "What about what?" They waited with their mother. At that moment, Leslie let Billy into the house. In his hands were 2 crusts and a bottle of champagne. "Hurrah!" Threw her hands up in the air at her mother. "Of course, everyone forgot about me again," said Angelica resentfully. "You what? Nobody forgot about anyone." Came up and hugged her mom. "Angelica, don't be offended. We came right away to be on time for your graduation. Her sister ran up. Thank you, she said. Everyone was preparing for the important event in the life of the youngest daughter and sister. There was no room for unnecessary talk. Well, it's time. The father was worried, as if he had never been to the graduation of his children. Let's go. They all left the house. The big family came to the school, where everyone had already gathered. Angelica went straight to her classmates. She's all grown up now, Archie said. He was so happy that his children were doing well in life. They stood around a little longer, realized they were no longer needed, and went home. Well, what about you? They sat at the festive table and hoped that today's graduate would come home. Let's go to the factory to settle, answered Leslie's parents. It's good. Young minds are now at a premium, rejoiced her mother, that they did not change their choice. Are you sure you want to be an engineer? Archie asked. Why do you ask? Do you doubt that I can do it? Was surprised Leslie. Of course not. I just wanted you as a mother to sit behind a desk in the office. Maybe you'd be more useful there. He smiled. Look, Dad, I've been coming to this for so many years that I have to listen to this now. My daughter seemed offended. Archie looked out the window. Something interested him. Again, Maria sighed. Don't swear, Leslie asked her. Billy and Leslie did as they pleased. They took their diplomas, and together they went to apply for jobs. Just as Archie had said, they were easily accepted there. You can stay here, their mother told them, when the young ones said they had been assigned a dormitory. What about you? Leslie wondered, as her father had wondered. We have a little time left before retirement. We will work until we go to the village, the woman said. When you go, then we will move, said the daughter with confidence. Good, agreed the parents. And again Maria rejoiced that she gave birth and brought up worthy members of society. Angelica entered, left the parental nest. Archie and Maria were left alone. Boring sat near the window. Archie. Nothing, will move soon. There will be something for everyone to do, his wife told him. They worked quietly until they could leave. Mom, maybe you'll think about staying. Leslie asked her parents. No, we have already decided everything. In the village, we will be more comfortable. What to do now here in the city? I want to start a farm, to do something. Maria has already set up to leave. Angelica was entering the medical school. She had a couple more years to study. And after that, the girl wanted to come to the village to help the local population. Her mom tried to talk her out of it, but her daughter wouldn't listen to her. Well, why do you force her? We will have a personal doctor, laughed the father. Barry graduated from the military institute. Now he was going to go further up the career ladder. Mother and father were both proud and worried about their son. That's it. It's time. They said goodbye to Leslie and Billy at the station. We'll keep coming, the daughter promised. And so, after all these years, Archie and Mary were back in their village where their life together had begun. The house was strong, of course, for so many years in it, a lot of leaks. There was enough work. The man did not sit idle. And Maria, as she wanted, bought some chicks and a couple of piglets. Well, what are they doing there? The wife came quietly to her husband. You're scaring me. He broke away from the hole in the hen house. You're at it again? The wife couldn't stop teasing him. What? You can't even look? He resented her. He was still ashamed of that incident. Why not? Just open the door and look in, she was showing him. Yeah, that way they'll see me and that's it. He disagreed. Ah, I realized you need something to see, because when they do not know that you are watching them, they do what they want, laughed his wife. They lived happily as before, loving and supporting each other. I'll probably go to the chairman, Archie said. Why? Maria didn't understand. I'll ask for a job, he said. Can't you stay at home? She flung her arms around her. Bored, Archie said. I see. The wife turned around and went into the yard to dig the garden or to feed the pigs. So he is bored. Give him another job. The chairman was glad the old guard was back, so he sent Archie to the farm. It was a dusty job, guarding the warehouse at night. He was glad he did. Now he had an official excuse. You know, he came home this morning. Steve and Lucy had climbed up on the stack today and spent the night. Why are you telling me all this? Maria asked. Each time there were new stories. Well, why? Who am I going to share it with? Archie was old now, but he still had his habit of peeping. Listen, they put you on guard, and what do? Maria wondered. They don't steal, but if they did, I'd show them. He showed his fist. Oh my grief, she hugged her husband. Mom, Dad, hi, Billy and Leslie are here for the weekend. Oh, why didn't you tell me? The woman hugged them. Well, it was spontaneous. My daughter was a strict, serious lady. Leslie, don't you want to please your father and mother with grandchildren? They were sitting at the table. Maria thought, if a little one appears in their house, then her husband will not have so much free time. Mommy, give a little more work, asked her daughter. She liked it so much, she was in no hurry. You are almost 30 years old, sighed the woman. So what? The woman wondered. No, nothing, the mother shrugged. Angelica didn't come? The daughter asked. No, she had disappeared in the north, the father said. After graduating from the institute, the girl was assigned there. She did not refuse, and now for several years has been missing at work. She occasionally wrote to her relatives how things were going, where she was, what she was doing, and what the weather was like there. That's all. I see all the fledglings have flown away, Leslie said, tightening her lips. She knew her mother was going to bring up Barry and start crying. The boy was in Afghanistan at the moment. Mother had learned it already from the letters. He did not write when and why he was sent there, just notified on arrival there. Mom saw her daughter, her chin trembled. He doesn't write to us at all, Maria said. So it's all right, the daughter took her mother's hand. Yes, a tear still could not stay on the eyelash and rolled down her cheek. Remember yourself. How do you want it to go to the front? Leslie told her. I don't want to. Maria squeezed her eyes shut. Every year she thought more and more about how her mom had felt then. And after all, she hadn't listened to anyone, just did what she wanted. Understandably, the girl got up and went outside. In the evening, everyone went to the bath. After that, there was a small feast, then the night, and in the morning the daughter and son-in-law went back. Mother and father were left alone again. Listen, today I saw the girls going to the disco, Archie said in the morning. How did you get to the club if the farm is on the outskirts of town? I just had a peep, said the husband. Oh, you can't do without your peepers, she laughed at him again. The older Archie got, the crazier his stories got. What are you saying? You've got to amuse yourself, the man answered her. Billy and Leslie arrived once again. The mother looked at her daughter and couldn't believe it. She was pregnant. Leslie, I'm so happy for you, and most of all for me. She hugged her. Mommy, is it too late? Suddenly, Leslie began to doubt. You what, it's never too late, she stroked her stomach. Now the grandparents were expecting a grandchild. They were discussing it one evening when there was a knock on the window. Who could it be? Usually no one knocks. Archie went over to look, but there was no one outside the window. Maybe a branch. Maria came up to him. What branch? I've knocked everything out for a good view. They peered into the darkness together. The door slammed behind them. Maria turned around and almost lost her senses. Barry was standing on the doorstep. It was already a real man. He was in military uniform, gray hair on his temples. His mother realized that it was not from age, but from what she had seen. Barry, she rushed over to him. Son, he's back. Hello, his father came up to him. It's been a long time since I've been here. Barry looked around. Sit down, you must be hungry. His mother pulled a chair over to him. Thank you. He sat down heavily. So tell me, what's up? The father looked at his son and couldn't believe that they were so old, if their child was so mature. Everything's fine, we're serving, just smiled at him. Wife, kids? Archie didn't know what else to ask. Yes, nodded Barry. How so? His mother almost dropped the label from his hands. I didn't write because she asked me to, said the son. Why aren't they with you? The woman got worried. They'll come tomorrow, he promised. Oh, so much good news lately. If only Angelica would come, we could die. She set the table and everyone sat down. Barry talked about his life. What was going on? His parents hadn't seen him in 6 years. Godson, I'm so glad. She stroked his cheek. In the morning, a pretty brunette came into the house, and with her a boy who was about 5 years old. Hi, my name is Baba Maria. She sat down in front of him. Harry, he smiled. Grandson, she pressed him against her. This is Sveta. The son introduced his wife. Here is a spy, married for so many years, has a son, and hid everything. His father wagged his finger at him. The guests stayed with the old men for a while and went to their garrison. Barry promised that if possible they would come and bring their grandson. Archie continued to keep watch over the farm, though Maria was already thinking that the chairman, in order not to offend him, had invented the job on purpose. He saw today how the boys seduce young girls, at them. Archie told me again. Listen, I've got news for you. I had a telegram in my hand. Yes, Archie said. Leslie has a daughter. Granny smiled from ear to ear. That's a joy. Grandpa clapped his hands. Now they were expecting them to come to them soon. What did you see there again? Maria asked him. Cydia. He showed her his index finger. Young girls were walking along the road, and he liked to look at them. Oh, what a shame they wore short skirts and bright makeup. Look, what Asatsa is coming. He nodded in the direction. That's right, Asatsa, said Maria. Oh, it's Angelica. Her hands trembled. Just don't die. He remembered what she'd said when Barry was here. Angelica walked into the house. She looked fashionable, which her parents didn't like. Mommy, Daddy, she stood in the doorway. You're my sunshine. Her mom hugged her, and then she started to ask what was going on in her life and told her about her brother and sister. I'm doing well. I'm getting married. Angelica smiled. There? The father guessed. Yes, confirmed the daughter. Well, we are not destined to come, sighed the mother. Don't worry, we'll come here next summer. Angelica touched her belly. And you? Mom clutched her face. She was so happy about every news. Yeah, they helped again. Angelica said she would spend a few weeks here and then she needed to go back. Her mother was so happy to hear that news. Maybe you'll catch Leslie too, Mother speculated. As it happened, Billy and Leslie arrived while her sister was still here. Hi, she greeted them. It couldn't be how many years, how many winters, the siblings hugged. Grandma was seeing her granddaughter for the first time. There was so much joy in everyone's eyes. But after heated conversations and sit-downs, everyone left. The house became quiet again. Don't be sad. We'll all get together again soon, Archie told his wife. Two families, Leslie and Barry and their children, came for New Year's Eve, and in the summer, as Angelica had promised, her husband and baby came with her. I thought we'd all get together, she said. Wait, they will definitely come, because we will play your wedding. Maria planned everything herself. Oh, she looked at her husband. Nothing, but you will feel what a village wedding is. Maria was happy. And so, finally, all the children and grandchildren were gathered. They put the tables in the fence, invited guests, harmonica player. The holiday was a success. Well, thank you, parents, pleased. In the morning, thanked them daughter together with her husband. You're welcome, hugged their mother. And everyone left again. Maria liked to sit by the stove. There she read, took, and did other things. Archie all sat by the window. Do you think they will come or not? Victory Day was approaching. Archie waited for his children and grandchildren to come and congratulate them. They must be busy, Maria sighed. Don't sigh, everything's fine. He watched a couple arguing outside the window. The village was growing. A new church had been built here in place of the old ruined one. Now Maria had an occupation. She went there on weekends and other holidays. Archie peeked at what the bishop was doing when no one could see him and told his wife. Don't tell me that, I won't believe it, she baptized. There was a bar in the center, near the club, where the local store used to be. Archie liked to go there. What are you doing there? His wife asked him. Look, it's interesting, he'd say. Oh, Archie, they'll knock you on the head and you'll find out, his wife warned him. Who dare? He put his finger up. You'll see, you used to be able to run away, but now you can't walk, she laughed. The children came mostly for birthdays and New Year's Eve. Sometimes they brought their grandchildren in the summer. Grandma and Grandpa were happy at those moments. Have you seen what they're building? My husband once said to his wife, Oh, what is it to you? They have now that every day. That's new, was not interested in Maria. No, I'll go and see, as is his habit. He went and sniffed everything and everywhere. Imagine a bathhouse. He came home. Aren't there enough bathhouses in the village? Maria didn't understand. I guess they're making a public one. Grandfather's eyes lit up. What are you up to, old man? She knew that look. Nothing. He turned back to the window. Maria was worried because she remembered the past. Don't worry, we'll live. We won't die, her husband reassured her. So they continued to live, each doing his own interests. The bathhouse was finished. Now young girls went there. "I'm going to work," Grandpa said, and left the house. "Yeah, I know your work." The old woman followed him. She saw him look around and then turn into the alley where the bathhouse was. She saw him there peeking, grinning, and rubbing his hands together. The next day, she decided to go there herself. She saw her husband asleep, got dressed, and left the house. "Hello." She saw some local girls in the locker room. "Good evening." They were surprised to see an old lady. "Listen, my geezer is following you every night here like a movie theater," said Maria. "What's wrong with you?" They were surprised. "I proposed to teach him a lesson," and she told them the plan. As you say, the girls stood and laughed. The next time Archie said he had to go to work, Maria waited until he left because she knew where he was going anyway, and then quietly went to the same place. She went in on the other side, and so her husband wouldn't see her, winked at those inside. They understood everything and started to turn into reality the plan of Baba Maria. "Oh, I wish someone would come here to steam us," said one of the girls. "Yes, but not a woman, but a man," said the second. "No, a young man will come, and how will we be?" They reasoned. "Maybe we should call some grandfather. He won't do anything to us," suggested one of them. "Girls," shouted the grandfather. He came in. "Who is it?" They squealed. "I've come to steam you." Archie never dreamed of such a thing. "Take off your clothes and come in," they told him. Archie was over the moon. Now he didn't have to peek in a hole. He could see everything with his own eyes and up close. Only he took off everything as the girls ran out and whipped him with brooms. The grandfather rushed through the door as he was, and they chased him, but he had no time to turn back and ran straight through the bushes to the river. And those bushes were not ordinary bushes, but nettles. The grass was burning. He fell down so that no one could see him, but the girls were whipping him. "That's enough. That's enough." Maria came up. "Well, have you realized how to watch others? Now the whole village has seen you," she said to her husband. "Maria, why are you like this?" He almost cried. "And how could I stop you from this habit?" She threw things at him. Archie stayed at home for a few days. He kept his nose to the street. One day he went out for bread and saw a neighbor coming. "Oh, Archie, we saw how you ran away from the girls. The whole village was laughing, how they were brooming you," he said to him. There was no need to peep. He realized that he was speaking his wife's words. At the holidays came the children. Maria took and told them about the strangeness of his father and how she taught him a lesson. The daughter laughed for a long time. They left, and the next weekend they were back again. "You've been coming a lot, of course." Maria didn't mind. "And we're here with presents." Leslie smiled and looked at her father. "We love presents." He stood up and walked over to his daughter. "We'll give them a little later. Billy is traveling somewhere with them." She passed and sat down at the table. "How about a bath?" The mother suggested it. "I wouldn't say no," agreed the daughter. Everyone was so grown up that it was hard to believe that life had passed. When they were drinking tea, they heard a car pull up. Here came the presents. Leslie got up and went out into the yard. Billy came into the house, a large box in his hands. "What's this?" The mother looked at her daughter. "You couldn't guess?" She smiled. "Is it a TV?" She clapped her hands. It was. Billy had put it on the nightstand in the corner. After everything was set up, Archie began to change channels. "Well, we've brought you a normal window. Now there will be someone to peep at," asked the daughter and hugged her father. "Thank you. You've made it easy." He was happy. Everyone was happy now. Archie didn't move away from the box that told him all the new news. He just widened his eyes when he heard things he never would have thought of. And the shows that were on. All day and all night while the kids were at their house, Archie would stare at the screen. "It's a thing. Why didn't I have it before?" Grandpa used to say. "But now you have it." Leslie and Billy said goodbye to their parents. "Thank you for everything." The father-in-law shook his son-in-law's hand. "Shall we go?" He nodded his head. "Where?" Archie glanced at his wife. "Don't be so afraid." Into the yard, he opened the door and stepped out. "Where are they going?" The mother asked her daughter quietly. I don't know if it was true. Billy hadn't said anything like that to her. "I don't know if your wife will let you watch this or not, but I personally brought you another present for myself." Billy looked around so that the women wouldn't see. and didn't go in their direction. "What is it?" Archie asked in a whisper. He liked such secrets between him and his son-in-law. Here, he pulled out a magazine with naked girls from under his jacket. "What's this?" Archie's eyes went round. Quietly, the son-in-law put his finger to his lips. Yes, yes, grandfather's eyes ran from such beauty. Billy was glad he pleased his father-in-law. "Oh, son, thanks." He put the magazine in his pocket and they went back out on the porch. "And what secrets have you got there?" Maria asked when the children had pulled away. "Look what he gave me." They entered the house, and the grandfather took out a magazine, which was full of pictures. "You, what a shame," Maria spat, and went to see what they were showing in their new window.